All right, so I'll call the meeting to order. It's 5:05 p.m. on Monday, December 11th, 2017. And this is our regular meeting. It's a special council meeting, and it's regarding the interim control bylaw. So do we have any declaration of pecuniary interest or general nature thereof?
I'm a neighboring property to, I think it's H14CC, the south side property on the southwest corner of 402 and 81. So in that piece I won't be partaking in discussion.
Okay. Seeing nothing else. What we'll do is I think Christy is going to go through the tables, or I'm not, or the report or something like that. I'll just hand it over to Christy, and she'll do her thing, and then afterwards we'll either I'm assuming we'll do questions afterwards.
Well, actually, I think it would be easier if we did questions as we went through.
Okay.
So that was kind of my approach. Is that I think everybody here has physical copies of both the table and the proposed amendment. So it's probably easiest to look at them in kind of a side-by-side fashion. So that was kind of going to be the approach that I was taking. But prior to starting, I just kind of wanted to go through a few things, if that's with you. So basically what you see before you is the result of the direction that was provided to county planning staff at the November 20th meeting. So at that meeting, you guys surprised us and went with the most robust option. That staff draft amendments to the official plan and zoning bylaw for council's consideration, which is what's presented this evening, and public consultation, which we're hoping to undertake in January to ensure consistency between the zoning bylaw, the commercial corridor policies, and provide for more organized, complete, streamlined policies and regulations guiding commercial development within the commercial corridor. So that was the underlying intent. This by far was the most robust and comprehensive option. So we did an in-depth review further to what we have done on a preliminary basis of the existing official plan and zoning bylaw in the context of the interim control bylaw and more specifically the municipal servicing agreement. So within the recommendation of the background report, we did allude to some of the things that we would be including within these proposed amendments. So some of those things were the reorganization of the commercial corridor policies to clarify municipal services section and how it relates to the other land use designations within the municipal service area, consolidation of the zone categories to eliminate redundancies, remove site specifics that are no longer applicable. We included clarification regarding the extent of the priority employment area to include special priority area 1, introduce new definitions in the zoning bylaw just to provide some overall clarity, and introduce new general provisions in the zoning bylaw that would provide more direction for development within the commercial corridor. Examples of this included automobile service stations and drive-thrus. So in that meeting, it was asked whether or not the work would also include recommendation 1 and recommendation 2. We indicated yes. So also included within the draft amendments you have this evening are proposed amendments to include establishing minimum floor space regulations in the zoning bylaw, removing permissions for large-scale residential development in accordance with the assumptions, and including parking and landscaping provisions. So the purpose of these amendments is truly to address some incongruencies between the township planning documents and other key decisions that have been applicable within the commercial corridor and municipal service area. So the first decision, as we reviewed last time, was the 1980 Ontario Municipal Board decision regarding the land annexation, and the second is that 2003 municipal service agreement with the municipality of Strathroy-Caradoc. So overall, we're intending to provide more fulsome and consistent policy and regulatory frameworks to guide planning and development within the township. So through, again, this process, we've identified a number of incongruencies between the expectations. We've tried to articulate them and provide, I guess, consistent direction in both the zoning bylaw and the official plan that really mirror what the intent of the municipal servicing agreement is. We really want to address the 4 assumptions that were provided and provide clarity to existing and future landowners actually regarding their permitted uses on their property with respect to land use permissions as well as long-term serviceability. So we also, through our review process, identified a number of opportunities to introduce supplementary and technical amendments to both the official plan and zoning bylaw. And as you can see through the work that we've done, there are a number of amendments being proposed within the documents. So these are being presented to council this evening for consideration, but largely for input as well. We do need to get a public notice out in the very near future, but we would also like to include within that public notice draft amendments as to what council is actually being, or actually what's going to be considered by council. So we want basically as much feedback as we can get on these draft policies. Nothing's written in stone right now. This is based on our interpretation of the policy documents, our interpretation of the regulations. However, we're looking to council as a whole for input based on your perspective, your local knowledge, and your local experience. So again, encourage you to kind of ask any questions or provide input as we go through the draft changes. And if there's any specific rationale or historic decisions that may impact what's currently contained in them, we can certainly consider it, do some more research, and hopefully include it within the draft official plan amendment and draft zoning bylaw amendment. So with that kind of overview provided, the first table that you have this evening is table 1. And it's an overview of the proposed changes to the official plan. So through, I guess this process, it would be easiest to focus mainly on the overview of the proposed amendment, what it's trying to achieve. The relationship to the assumptions is just to keep us mindful that there were assumptions developed and that we were trying to address them. But really, we're mostly focusing on the contents of these amendments and how receptive council is to the proposed changes. So the first policy area that saw significant change in the official plan was policies pertaining to the municipal service area. So just for context, within the current official plan, there is a section, it's 3.3.4, 3.3 point something, that basically says municipal services. It's embedded within policies that pertain specific.
3321.
It's the old policy, so 3.3.4.4.
Okay, 3344.
Yeah, so this is what the basis for the municipal services currently is. The issue that we found was that this is embedded within policy direction for commercial corridor, notwithstanding it alluding to some direction for residential use and minor infilling. So really when we look at this drawing, I don't think you guys have a copy of it, it's from the first report. Yeah, so the policy that is currently within the plan really only applies to the pink area. However, all the residential is in this yellow area. So there are no provisions for municipal servicing, despite it being included within the municipal servicing boundary for this area in yellow. So the first thing we did was to generalize that policy direction, and to do that we basically created a new section, which is the 3.3.2.1, which is just a general overview of the municipal service area. So basically this policy identifies the extent of the municipal area. So going back to this map, it's where this red outline is, so it's quite a large area. And it basically says that within this area, this is where the servicing agreement applies and where the water and sanitary services are provided by the municipality of Strathroy-Caradoc. So the intent of the area is identified and basically focuses on commercial corridor land uses and existing uses, and that's language that we've pulled from the servicing agreement. So this policy is meant to partially replace the policy that was previously within the commercial corridor, but generalize it, removing reference specifically to residential uses. So to complement that, staying within the municipal service area, we introduced additional policy direction in the residential land use area. So residential areas land use designation, which is the yellow part, which previously had no specific policy direction previously with respect to the municipal service area. So this is where we see the introduction of section 3.3.3.4, the municipal service area. So this policy direction essentially states that notwithstanding the direction for residential areas, because in your official plan, residential areas includes not only this portion, but the portion of properties over by Napperton and Pike, Kerwood, Buttery Creek. There's a number of different areas. So 3.3.3.4 speaks only to these lands within the municipal service area that are designated for residential. So we really want to make them their own little policy kind of classification. So one of the assumptions that was developed through the background was that really the intent is that there be no large-scale residential development. That's not something Strathroy-Caradoc is willing to service. That's been outlined in the agreement. It's been outlined over the years repeatedly. So basically, we've scoped it by removing general permissions for large-scale residential development, and we've scoped it to say that minor residential infilling may be permitted, and we've established criteria. So this criteria is certainly open to conversation. It is a little different. This is a settlement area still, even though it's within the township per the PPS definition. And generally, we would not be supportive of private services being used in a settlement area to accommodate residential growth. However, basically, the criteria say that if you can demonstrate that the extension of municipal services is unreasonable, to cost prohibitive, or they're unavailable, so similar to what we were just talking about the church, where there would be a significant cost to the owner to be able to facilitate that connection, then development may be permitted on municipal service. We're not talking about large-scale development, we're talking about a single infill lot. So if you have a large property, I just think some of the properties back here may have potential for a severance, you would be potentially permitted to create one additional lot and service that with a private service. We wouldn't want the construction of any new roads, so that's kind of getting away from the subdivision, and we want adequate frontage on a public road. So again, moving away from some of these panhandle lots that we've had previously. So that is a significant addition to these policies, but it really is meant just for the people, or just for the lands in this particular area. So does anybody have any feedback or require clarification on where we were going with that one?
So at this time, we don't have any services in that particular area.
I believe that the services begin on the north side of the creek, so anything below here,
Right, yeah.
it does not have access.
So we don't have anything.
No, these are all privately serviced. I believe even Charles Boulevard is privately serviced. So to have somebody basically run servicing up Charles Boulevard to service one lot would be cost prohibitive. So this is the case where under the provincial policy statement, there's enough wiggle room that we could say it would be onerous, they're not actually available, despite being within the municipal service area. So that's kind of the criteria we established were, we wanted to get away from intensification, which we thought would be multi-lot, or large-scale residential development, which would be the subdivision of the condo. So we can contemplate the one lot, might be able to stretch it to 2 lots, but anything beyond that we would call intensification, and we would be looking at servicing.
So if somebody wanted to service that lot, we have no sewers to connect to our water or sewer, sewer I should say. So even if somebody wanted to develop that, they have to get permission from Strathroy or Caradoc to hook onto the sewer.
So
If they wouldn't allow it, if Scott said, no, we don't want you to connect, because we have so much today we can connect to, right? So if somebody wanted to build and do something there and really did want to go to the expense, like the church, or like this particular case, they would have to get permission from Strathroy Caradoc to say, yes, Strathroy Caradoc, you can hook up onto our sewer, providing, well, it's going to be an extra cost for us as a township. Am I correct?
So, kind of. So, if you're looking at the church in particular, that's a pretty good example. The connection is up here or way back here. So extending to them is onerous, and it would be at the expense of the church.
Yes.
So we've historically allowed them to use private services. We're saying if somebody were to do a lot back here, we wouldn't say, based on the servicing agreement, you are required to connect. We're saying that we've established provisions that exempt you from that connection in certain cases.
Okay. Yeah.
So we want to give them a little bit of flexibility, because really this is a residential area,
Yes.
and to extend for one lot, the cost would be significant. You never
Oh, yeah,
recoup
no, no.
that.
Okay.
So there is a little bit of flexibility there, and that's what this policy direction is intended to achieve, is to give us the flexibility to separate the two.
Okay.
So what Christy's talking about right now is specifically residential lots, though.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
just
Just wanted to
residential
show. Yeah.
for now.
Yeah.
Councilor Hendricks.
But there is servicing available because I'm pretty sure along Center Road, there are people there with services.
Some have it and some don't. It's
Some
not
have
fully
decided
serviced,
not
so.
to pay for it
Yes.
and then they can't sell their house.
Right, right. And then there's some that do have it and some that don't. It's
But
not,
it is available on Charles Boulevard.
yes, yeah.
Councilor McKinnon, any questions at all?
No.
Deputy Stockman.
Okay, so this is only applying to the yellow area then?
Yeah.
This is not applying to, for instance, Mr. Nordhoff's house or the cleaning place's house or stuff like that?
I don't know.
I don't.
Nordoff would be the two little lots north of the UR zone that we were looking at today, the little house and the,
Okay.
back.
No, so this is just for the area that's designated residential. So we'll get to the second part, which is the commercial in a second.
But, okay, I'll
Yeah.
raise the question there.
That's under section 3.3 is the urban area, which is the first set of 3.3, and then when we get into 3.3.4, that's when it becomes the commercial part, which is the rest of the big part.
So, one thing further, we've talked about church a couple of times. I thought they had bought
They bought
additional,
They did buy capacity, they didn't have before, they did buy capacity. The cost is still prohibitive for them to be able to connect because of the location that they would be required to connect to. But they did choose to go ahead and buy some capacity so that they were protected in the future.
okay.
Yes.
I-
They
I
just
thought
have
that
not
the-
connected because of the location of where they would be required to connect and the cost that they would have to incur.
So are we okay with that kind of, that's a new policy direction that's a little
That's
different than
good.
what our previous direction was.
Good.
So for the final aspect of the municipal service area was that we scratched the original policy 3.4.4 within the commercial corridor. And that's because we've broken it up into the two that I just talked about, as well as adding the requirement under the site development criteria that development shall be subject to confirmation that adequate municipal servicing is available. So we've not entirely scratched it, we've broken it up, relocated it in more appropriate locations, and that's again to maintain consistency with the intent of the municipal service area with respect to the two different land designations that are there currently. So moving on, the second aspect that we did an in-depth look at is the residential areas land use designation policies, and that's again just the yellow area. We only made minor changes here. So under section 3.3.3.1, the defined use and area, we just relocated the statement that new residential development will accommodate a limited range of housing types given the available water and sanitary sewage services. We just actually threw that into the next section, 3.3.3.3, and so that applies to all residential areas. We also tried to increase the flexibility of the document instead of saying that development will be permitted by plan of subdivision. It's always an application process, subject to municipal approval, public consultation, a number of variables. So we felt will was too strong, we replaced it with may. It's just a minor tweak. So that's all we did really within the residential area, with the main consideration being the addition of the municipal service area policies that we just discussed. So, moving on, the third and
Deputy Stockman.
So that 3.3.3.3, the second paragraph, the old paragraph where you've taken will out
Yeah.
and may in,
Oh, yeah.
that doesn't apply to the Highway 81 corridor.
no, that only applies to the yellow area, and the yellow area in Kerwood, the yellow area in Abberton at Pike. So the urban area is comprised of the pink area and the yellow area. So we're just looking, the residential is the yellow area.
Go ahead.
So the majority of our official plan amendments were contained within the commercial corridor land use designation. And on our map, that's the pink, which is what we typically call the corridor. It's where we see the commercial development, or hope to see the commercial development moving forward. So the first thing that we did here was some minor tweaks to the objectives, just the wording that we used. We took out business service. We thought that had the connotation of kind of saying office, contractors' yards, and these are things that really weren't supported by the underlying agreement and annexation order. So we broadened it and said highway commercial uses. So there was just a little bit of minor wordsmithing just to increase the generality of the objectives. The second component is we really focused on the expansion of the defined area and use under section 3.4.2. And here we really wanted to, I guess, advocate that this is really intended to be a concentration of highway commercial uses that form an attractive, fully serviced commercial node separated from agricultural, residential, and downtown commercial uses. So we're really trying to emphasize that one of the assumptions we developed was that this area is meant to be a gateway feature into Adelaide Metcalfe and through to Strathroy Caradoc. So everything beyond is really trying to support what this defined area and use character is supposed to be, or in our opinion, what we want it to be, based on kind of some direction that we have within the policies currently and what those guiding decisions have indicated to us previously. So we're emphasizing highway commercial, we're emphasizing attractive, and we're emphasizing that it's fully serviced. So we made some minor amendments to the range of permitted uses that we're hoping to see. And we've, again, focused our hope that these uses be destination-oriented or intended to serve the traveling public. We had some discussion with Jeff earlier today about why destination-oriented, why to serve the traveling public. And really that's to achieve kind of another assumption, which is the non-compete clause that we've have come to know. So we want people to go destination, so to like the home hardware, to the car dealership, to the gas bar serve the traveling public. So we're really trying to make this, it's going to be automotive oriented. You're going to have to go in your car to get there for the most part, and they're going to be uses that require a lot of parking that have a bigger prominence. So when I was talking to staff earlier today, I was kind of likening it to what Wonderland Road is turning into. It's a lot of stores, a lot of busyness, but it's car oriented, and that's kind of what we want to see here, and that's the purpose of it in our opinion. So we've included some language to support that, being destination oriented, intended to serve the traveling public. And then we've kind of scoped it to say similar uses will be more specifically outlined within the zoning bylaw. So we really want the zoning bylaw to be our implementation tool. We don't want to establish permitted uses within the official plan. It's a lot harder to change the official plan than the zoning bylaw. So we're trying to go more generalized, and then the specific uses are in the context of the official plan. Also within this section, the rest are kind of stroke outs. So what we've done is we've removed the requirement that new or expanded motels and restaurants shall also be permitted subject to the availability of municipal water supply and sanitary sewage. We've now included a provision in a later section that all development and redevelopment is subject to the availability of municipal services. So it was a redundancy that we're looking to eliminate. Further down, we scratched contractors' establishments. There is a contractor's establishment currently. However, that's not exactly the type of use we're hoping to see there, because it does have an industrial aspect which isn't fully supported by the servicing agreement, particularly due to the proximity to the industrial park.
But these are existing,
Yeah.
and so we're not going to change that.
No.
Because like the Commodore Industries on the old Pollock property, or we just added to Clark Hassan, and that was a contractor's establishment. So, because it says here, new industrial uses which engage in on-site manufacturing and processing shall not be permitted. But say that Commodore leaves and somebody else wants to come in there, I would think they should be able to continue utilizing that facility to do manufacturing if that's what fits in there.
So if I may respond. So within the zoning bylaw, we've included the permitted use of an existing use. So what's there now shall be allowed to continue in some capacity until it basically is decommissioned. So the example we see is the old West Cast. It was previously more manufacturing. It's now changed to what we call wholesaling or warehousing. So they will be permitted to continue such a use until they've completely discontinued it. So where it might get a little tricky is significant expansions. We're going to have to look at how that will impact. But really, manufacturing and processing, the intent is not to have that within the corridor because they are considered in competition with the intent of the industrial park.
But Clark Hassan, we've just given them permission to add 2 buildings to their property.
Yes, we did.
They got in at the right time.
Yeah.
But they're not processing or manufacturing.
No, but they are a contractor's establishment, which is another form of quasi-industrial use, mainly due to the outdoor storage component that they have and the security that they require. So had Clark Hassan actually waited, he would have been fit under the existing use and he would have been permitted without a zoning bylaw. His issue was that he needed things done in the fall. He couldn't wait for the amendments to go through in the spring to get those new buildings. So we are trying to accommodate such uses where, future, we're trying to recognize that, there are some anomalies in our current land use pattern, and we're recognizing that, so we're permitting the existing uses, but we don't want a new large-scale manufacturer to come in and say, develop on the cutting lands. That's what really would not be permitted. Where it's on a site that has an existing use, there's going to be some flexibility and room for interpretation. It's the brand new sites that we're trying to discourage.
So would the word grandfathered be included in the document somewhere?
So we try not to use grandfather because it's not actually a legal term. And we've been caught a couple of times in legal situations.
Oh, okay.
So right now it would be basically what we call existing or what was previously legal non-conforming.
Yeah.
So we're everything, the day it's adopted, the day that it exists,
That's its footprint.
it will be as of that date. That is what is approved and allowed in the corridor. And that's why we've made some tweaks, is that there are things that exist right now that don't physically exist, the permissions exist, that if they were to establish, it would really be in contradicting the intent of the policies.
But some of these have been there for, I was going to say ages, but significant length of time.
So actually, my question is gonna be, so Stratford's basically tell us what we can or cannot build there.
So it's in Stratford, it's through the service agreement. So
Right,
between
yes. Through the hookups or the service agreement, say you can build this, you can't build that, you can't build this. Instead, I don't think we have a whole lot of choice. Are we satisfied with this? We're gonna have to be satisfied with this, so,
So really, I think what Christy's alluding to is that the servicing agreement was in effect since 2003.
Yes.
And we didn't. We should have updated the official plan to go alongside with the servicing agreement. So now we're just putting it up to date. And yes, there are businesses that had been there for a long time, but now we just have to update our official plan to say what we can and can't allow.
This is something our previous planner should have taken care of.
Well, we should have followed through as time went on. I remember when I was a council in 2003 when this all happened, but we should have, you're right. Now all of a sudden we're saying to ourselves 10, 15 years later, hey, we better look at this.
Yeah.
Okay, but what's done is done. I mean,
Yeah.
now we gotta go
Move
from
on.
here.
Move on,
Yeah.
So
okay.
if there are concerns about the prohibition on new industrial uses, that is something we can bring back to the table and reconsider if council so directs. But it is pretty clear in the servicing agreement that industrial uses are one of the main reasons that we're potentially seeing this issue, is that the intent of the servicing agreement is that we don't compete with their downtown, which is why we see the size requirements, and that we don't compete with Moeller. So if it's council's wish to have that reevaluated in the next week or so, we can do that. If there are concerns about implementation, but I need that direction to come from you guys.
Go ahead.
I know I was speaking to Christy earlier today about the greenhouses and how large users they don't want them on the in the corridor. And to my mind, the greenhouses today aren't large users because they're using the water from the rooftop and recirculating it down, or they have their own.
They're
Oh,
better, they've got a
yeah.
lot better
Yeah.
technology.
Oh, yeah.
But that may be one of the areas that we have a problem with because Strathroy's got flaggers on the other side of,
That's a different,
but they'll be using that, and they're high users, are they, Christy, high water users? Or you don't know?
I can't
No,
confirm.
they wouldn't be high users, not that big, well, maybe Nick was more.
No, well, like, if we're referring to the greenhouses,
Yes.
that's number 2, that isn't even serviced. That's the old
Yeah.
Decker property.
We're talking about new greenhouses.
Yeah,
So that'd be, yeah.
We're talking about new ones
yeah.
on
In
here,
the
right?
corner.
Am I correct?
Yes.
So if I
Yes.
may interject, currently, where we're kind of taking greenhouses right now is that in 2018, growing marijuana, growing operations are probably going to become a hot topic. Right now, we don't have the policy direction to call them anything other than a greenhouse, really, and to our knowledge, they are significant water users. So there are criteria established within the zoning bylaw that provide a little bit of direction until we're provided with more fulsome direction, kind of from a top-down provincial level, that we could take greenhouses perhaps out of this category if it's, a flower greenhouse or a tomato greenhouse, and really establish growing facility greenhouses and differentiate the two. So it's kind of a catch-all right now, but I think that's still outside of the scope of an industrial use. It's kind of quasi-agricultural, quasi-industrial. I'm not really sure where to put it in the context of the official plan, but really I'm looking for direction on on-site manufacturing and processing, and whether or not that there's a significant concern with that here.
Any concerns?
No. I do and I don't. I mean, if Strasbourg is so against it, I mean, there's no use fighting it. And do we have enough options, like a gas station or whatever it may be? Well, yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a whole lot of choice, so yeah, I'm satisfied the way it is. I can live with this. I mean, I think there's enough other opportunities to develop it. So,
And I think trying to tie it all into the servicing agreement makes a lot of sense because the OMB made that decision. They're not going to go against their own decision, so we have to sort of tie ours into their thinking.
yeah.
Until that servicing agreement is amended or disposed of.
yeah, the biggest red flag I saw is what you call processing. Because through OMAFRA, processing can mean things as simple as bagging or cleaning. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
the produce farmers have this fight all the time, whether it's a farm expense or an industrial use. And they're fighting with MPAC and OMAFRA on those issues all the time. So I'm not even sure at this point, because it's been a few years since I was involved in those discussions. I don't even know what the situation is right now.
So would there be a definition from OMAFRA that we could?
So your zoning bylaw does have a definition for manufacturing, which actually includes processing. But we could further try and define or do some research for a definition of what processing is. But just for your information, manufacturing is defined as the production, compounding, processing, packaging, crafting, bottling, packing or assembling of raw or semi-processed or fully processed goods or materials, and shall include a recycling business having its operation completely contained within an enclosed building. So that's what they're calling manufacturing. I'm assuming processing would be probably include
Yep.
some of those, which is probably why you don't have a definition of processing. But
Then I've got a manufacturing facility too.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Because I'm taking corn, bean, soybean meal, wheat, calcium, ground up, pelleted, and I'm feeding it into livestock, and they're producing this highly nutritious self-contained protein package.
Yeah, I don't think they're gonna let you get, I don't think they're gonna let you get a chicken run along the corridor, so we're not interested in that anyway. That's getting out of there. Out of the
Agriculture falls
discussion.
out, and that's where that's where the line has a hard time getting set. Is whether vegetable producers are processing or just making their product ready for market, the same way you pack eggs.
So we're mainly looking at,
Yeah, it's two different things. Yeah.
yes, so are we happy with that? That's where we carry on, because we can discuss this
So
all night.
would council like a processing definition added for clarity in the zoning bylaw? Or,
Only
or
if
is
it
that
involves
redundant?
agricultural products.
Okay.
If it just involves non-agricultural products, then that definition is correct.
And there is industrial right east of the boundary. So it's not as if, you know, there is no place for industrial. And we can provide facilities or have companies put up facilities to service that. I would think.
So the scope of industrial uses that we're recommending be included within the corridor would be wholesaling similar and warehousing similar to what Huron Produce is currently doing in the West Coast building. So anything beyond that, we start having to look at interpretation quite closely as to what is manufacturing and what is processing. So based on conversations with Strathroy-Cardock, they're not really interested in wholesaling or warehousing in their business park because it's a large land base with very little activity or comparatively less activity than what some of their manufacturing and processing would be. So basically we've said we'll take, or we're willing to take the wholesaling and warehousing, but anything really beyond, more intensive or more assembly based would have to be outside of the corridor and into the, likely the Muller service, or Muller Park.
So how is RICO fitting in there?
So
That's in
that's in
Stratford.
Strathroy-Cardock.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's one of the retail businesses in the industrial park.
Large
Yeah,
retail business.
Yeah, so,
That's something
Do
we're
as I
discussing.
say,
another
Yeah.
time.
do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah, that's another discussion that's outside the scope of this.
So just going back, I know we're talking about more of the industrial uses, but with the removal of the contractors' establishments. So is that something just, so that, I'm assuming, is there any discussion of whether we can keep that in, or is that something that we'd have to leave?
No, anything that's in here
Yeah.
is open to discussion. The contractor's establishment, I believe where it came from is actually correspondence between Mark Harris and perhaps previous administration here, is that contractor's yard was actually not contemplated within, as being a permitted use within the servicing agreement. So that's kind of why we stroked it, is that there has been a discussion on it historically, and we didn't feel that it was within the scope. That being said, we do have Clark Hassan in there, and they did not oppose his expansion, but I don't think his expansion is a high water use or competing with anything. I don't know what county's wish is on this one, but if you want us to do a little bit more research, we can certainly facilitate that.
So I think with the industrial uses, I think we all know or should know that that's one of the uses that aren't supposed to really be in that commercial corridor because it's supposed to be mostly commercial. Whereas I think a contractor's establishment is a little bit different, but that's just kind of my thought. Considering, you know, Clark Hassan, yes, they're building there, and you know people are coming and going, which is, you know, the contractor's yard. I'm not sure what else could really be in there, but.
I don't have any problem with leaving it in, like, and I don't have any problem with taking it out.
No.
I mean, I'm just kind of
No.
sitting on the fence on it.
Okay.
No. Either way, it's fine with me.
So it's either way. I would think that we probably
Take it in.
I would say we leave it in so we have more options for.
Yeah.
But that's I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. if they have a.
Well, the more we believe in, the better chances we have, so.
Yeah,
That's probably the right way to go, because if we start to believe in a whole lot of things, and all of a sudden we're sitting there with not a whole lot, if we leave it in, maybe we got a chance to.
yeah.
Yeah, that's true, very true.
So I will bring that one back for further review and discussion, and let you guys know what the feedback is, basically. So we will have to, should it be appropriate to remain, we have to reflect in the zoning bylaws of permitted use as well, so there will be two changes associated with it. So then, are we done discussion on industrial uses?
Yep.
Is there any further comment or consideration? No? Okay. So moving on, the next particular was that basically there was a reference to the zoning bylaw will regulate the location and screening of outdoor storage. The purpose of the zoning bylaws is far beyond just regulating the location and screening of outdoor storage. We've indicated in the subsequent section that development is subject to site plan control, so we thought that this was basically a redundant provision that we could remove. So continuing on, we did do, it appears to be an extensive revision of the site development criteria. However, these policies were likely elsewhere within the OP, or we've just kind of rearranged the wording to strengthen them. So the first one is that development approval shall be subject to the requirements of Section 41 of the Planning Act and the Township Site Plan Control Bylaw. So that means any development, new development, or redevelopment of any properties within the PINC will have to go through the site plan control process. And we've already started initiating that here. So we saw site plan for the dentist, we saw site plan for the gas station. We've seen a draft site plan for the potential hotel development, another potential gas station, Clark Hassan. So we're already well on our way to doing that. This basically just puts it in policy that it's now a requirement. It also allowed us to reduce some of the holding provisions that were in place. So further along in the zoning bylaw changes, we'll see that a number of holding provisions were scratched out, holding symbols. That's basically, it said, subject to site plan control. So if everything's subject to site plan control, we don't need to keep applying that holding. So it just gave us a little bit more of a streamlined document. The second is that development of approval shall be subject to the confirmation that adequate municipal servicing is available. And again, that's now going to be any development, any redevelopment in that pink area. So basically, in some of the holding provisions, it was kind of an afterthought in that they got their land use permission, but they still hadn't confirmed that servicing was available. Now we want that up front. We want to know what their use is going to be, what their allocation is, whether or not they need to purchase additional allocation from the township. And we want this at the beginning of the process instead of at the end of the process. So we're hoping that by having that official plan policy, again, we can reduce some of the redundancies in the holding and have a better idea of what's being proposed and how much water it's going to use, how much waste it's going to generate. Then C, D, and E are all about establishing the gateway and making it more attractive. So these are policies that were, in some aspects, already within your official plan. We've just beefed them up a little bit and said that we really want this landscape or open space buffer along the front of your properties. We don't want everything right to the road. We want there to be some attraction, some trees. We also want the number of access points to be reduced, which is a same policy that was there previously. So we want the accesses consolidated where possible, and that parking areas be organized primarily in side or rear yards. This will facilitate shared use between the properties, but it will also reduce the visibility and promote a more attractive streetscape. So we're not putting the hammer down and saying we need urban design guidelines and want the glass buildings and the brick facades. We're just saying one step at a time, let's get some trees down that road and let's not just see cars everywhere. So we're trying to take baby steps here, using what you guys have already had, supplementing it a little bit and hoping that that will help us achieve the gateway feel. As I indicated to Betty Ann earlier today, we don't have a lot going on the west side of the road, so if we establish these parameters now, we'll be able to guide development a little bit more along the west side of the road, and then hopefully as the east side redevelops, we can hold them to the same standard and really redefine that streetscape and increase its amenity and visual appeal.
Deputy Stockton?
But the car dealerships, they want their vehicles out front
Yeah, so,
because that's the drawing point.
absolutely. So, if I may, what we've done is in the zoning bylaw, we've said these rules apply except in the case of auto dealerships, except in the case of certain uses, basically automotive in nature. So it's really, we're looking at the limited industrial uses, the larger offices, the home hardwares, the Ronas, getting them to really make an attractive front and kind of hiding. We understand that there is an appeal to having the cars out front, so we've included provisions in the zoning bylaw to exempt them from some of this requirement.
But like home hardware really has no place to put vehicles on the side. Even Rona, most of their parking, like there's certainly more than 25% is out front. Yeah, they have a few trees there, but trees always take time to grow, and trees along a road don't get along real well with salt.
So just,
But this is new.
this is for new development,
Yeah.
so those are already existing
and-
things.
No, I
And to
think
be
it's a great
fair,
idea.
Rona
I just
does
think about it a
look
little
nicer.
attractive. I mean, instead of all pillars and stone and brick and pavement, I think it's, to me, it's a great idea. It doesn't matter if the parking, the car dealership, but then somebody else may plant a few trees or shrubs or whatever it may be, make it look, yeah, I think it should be. I think it's a good idea.
And the newer ones like Rona's is more attractive than the home hardware site already, because they have greened up the front, and even though they've got the parking in front, they do have a green space in front of it.
Yeah, they don't have to have the whole thing green, but along the road, I think it's a great idea.
Keep the, the salt won't make its way all the way back.
Oh, you'd be surprised. You'd be
I'm gonna plant
surprised.
salt-free trees then.
I tried on my piece on Pike Road along 402, that's on the south side of 402. I tried 3 rows of trees there way back, spruce and green ash. Between the deer and the salt, nothing.
Well, there won't be any deer on 81 night. Carry on.
One thing, Chris, before we
Yes,
continue on,
they
just
are.
looking at the items, this C, should we also be adding on Second Street as well as for the access points? I don't know what county road number that is, but just to reduce the amount of access points along Second Street as well, or are we just going to be looking just at the?
No, so that's completely at your discretion as to whether or not you think it's appropriate. There's not a whole lot of development on Second Street, and that's kind of why we said, you have the access to the storage buildings, you have the access to Clark Hassan. Clark Hassan shares that parking lot with the manufacturer in Strathroy. There's not a whole lot of opportunities to consolidate access points. The biggest one may be 9 Second Street with 41 Second Street. And I think that's already been discussed. I believe there's an easement established there. So we didn't see it as a requirement. It's a lower volume. I think it's a collector versus an arterial. So we did run these by Chris, and Chris didn't have any significant concerns. So it's really at the township's discretion whether or not they want to extend the consolidated access points to Second Street.
I think this Center Road is sufficient
Yeah.
because there isn't a whole lot of depth, from Center Road to on Second Street to the boundary. See, and like McEwen's, they have one on Second and one on the joined one on Center Road. You go beyond that, okay, Pollux, the commander, and the employment center. That's 2 separate ones. So yeah, I don't see that as an issue.
The only one that I can see is just that L-shaped lot that goes around that 9 Second Street. That's all that's really would be there that could be conjoined. And as long as that's already communicated with them, then that's fine. I'm just thinking about if we want to make sure there's less access point because it is close to the intersection.
And I believe as proposed, the access point to that is quite close to the property line, that far property line in the drawing we've seen.
Yeah.
And I believe there is an easement that runs along that property line for that purpose, at least back in the day that was the purpose. We haven't heard any development plans on 41 recently, 41 Second recently, so at that time it's something we could communicate, saying that, it's encouraged along Center Road. I believe the owners made Are they somehow linked?
They are somewhat linked, yes,
Yeah.
they say.
So, it may be to their advantage, but, we just thought because of the volume of traffic along Center, that was our foremost concern. And the policy direction was in your plan as it is.
Perfect.
Yeah, good.
Do you want it just to reflect county roads as opposed to 81 and in that way it's a slight moderation. It does allow for anything on Second Street at the same time. And that way it's covered off without a big change and not specifically saying Second Street as well. It just says along the county roads.
Well, if that,
And that covers both.
well, then why wouldn't you do that?
Yeah.
That is the council's wish.
Yeah, well,
Is there any other, questions or?
I think that already gets covered, really, because if you read further on, where possible access points onto any county road shall be consolidated within abutting properties. So I think that's already covered.
So it just makes it clear that it's County Road 81 and all. So any county roads are within that neighborhood.
I think it's already covered. You're specifically saying 81, but any other county road as well, so I think it's covered.
So kind of keeping that same train of thought, would you like D, the new uses requiring the landscaping or buffer strip to also extend to the Center Road, or to Second Street? Or is that
yeah,
limited?
yeah, I think so.
We may as well just have it that any landscape, it should be along the right of ways, because then you have the mall here that is also included as well. And just because it's a municipal road, a township road, doesn't mean that it should be exempt from doing buffering as well. Just
Yeah.
there.
Well,
Why wouldn't it be consistent? I mean, it's all.
to me,
it
I,
all-
yeah,
You're looking at all
keep
of
it
it,
simple,
so-
keep it, and keep it consistent with,
Okay. And then with respect to the parking areas, is that really just the gateway along Center Road, or is your wish to extend that into?
Yeah, I think so. 'Cause I think you run out, the corner lots, you run out of parking space.
Yeah.
You don't.
And I think the consistency would be to keep it all fronting on Center as opposed to all of a sudden now their frontage is here, so now they're saying their side yard is on Center, so you've got parking here on a lot that may be on the corner, so it's consistently always on the Center is considered their main.
And then with respect to the final amendment within the site development, it's just as amended or updated. That was a request to Shopford Paradox because their stormwater management plans may change and evolve over time. They don't want to have to do an OPA every time it gets amended.
can we go back just for a second,
Yeah,
please?
absolutely.
So say that again, I think.
Yes, can you repeat the last?
Yeah.
Are you looking at F?
Yes.
Yeah.
So F.
Okay, yes, drainage, stormwater management, yep.
So we just added as amended or updated because their study may change over time, and we just didn't want them to have to come back and say, do a full official plan amendment for a few words to make it the most applicable document.
Yep.
So it's just to really increase the applicability. So then, page 4, there's just some relocation of some wording as we previously identified for section 41 of the Planning Act, that's site plan control. Section 3.3.4.4 municipal services, that's been divvied up and relocated. And then finally, there's the special urban policy areas. So special urban policy area 1 is this area down at the bottom, just north of the residential area, north of the creek, that we're going to discuss probably in detail in a few minutes in the zoning bylaw. But right now, the priority employment areas where we want to direct all our employment, our commercial uses effectively, it actually doesn't include these lands that are pink down here.
Okay,
So we've basically just recommended that it be extended to include them to make a a document more reflective of what the intent of the policy area actually is. So while not written under Special Policy Area 1, Special Policy Area 1, the schedule will be amended. And then we just stroked out industrial uses as provided for in section 3.4.4.2b are not permitted. We could not find where 3.4.4.2b existed within the current official plan, the old official plan, current zoning bylaw, or old zoning bylaw. So we just figured that it says that they're actually industrial uses are not permitted. We thought that it wasn't entirely applicable, so we just stroked it out for clarity, basically. Similarly, 3.3.5.5, the commercial corridor, we just changed the wording around a little bit, so permitted highway commercial uses, and then stroked out that section 3.4.4.2 again, because we don't know where it is. So then with respect to, those are all the text amendments that we proposed for the official plan. As I just described, the only mapping amendment that we proposed was just the inclusion of this area down in the south portion here to be included within the priority employment area. And that's just to align that it's designated for commercial purposes. We're hoping to zone it for commercial purposes. It really should be within your priority employment area, in our opinion. So that was the only schedule change we were proposing. And if council is okay with that, we can wrap up discussions on the OP.
Take yourself into a question.
Going back to 3351, that was really put in there for Canadian Tire, potential Canadian Tire,
Yes,
way back.
potentially.
And then a movie theater.
Yeah. And then what else? Oh, yep. Put it in.
So we figured that because it's basically saying commercial uses, large format retail, restaurants, and business service uses are permitted. Industrial uses are not necessarily. They would still be allowed to have their wholesaling and their warehousing as in industrial uses. So we didn't feel it necessary. Technically, what they're saying is that it's basically similar to the rest of the commercial corridor. But we didn't scratch the policy because it does include business service, which is a larger scale, say call center or office use above 5,000 square feet. So we tried to eliminate the business service language, but this provided specific direction for it. So they left it in. Is that okay?
Is there any questions on the official plan proposed changes? Okay.
So can I just quickly go through what I have for kind of consideration? So we can look into definition of processing and how it relates to on-site manufacturing and processing. Contemplation of the inclusion of contractor's yard or contractor's yard and establishment to remain. And then the amendments where the site development criteria apply to all county roads and not just center, with the exception of the parking requirements. Pretty much the direction that I've heard. I just want to make sure. Perfect. So did you want to take a 5-minute break? May I have a 5-minute break?
Yes. We'll take a 5-minute break. So now we'll be doing the table 2, the zoning bylaw amendments.
Yes, that's all right. We good? Okay. So, for the zoning bylaw, we had to do a little bit more work. First, we had to make sure it was consistent with all those changes we just proposed within the official plan. But then we also had to ensure that there was going to be consistency with servicing agreement, the annexation order, and then we wanted to make sure it reflected what's on the ground. So we did do a couple of drive-throughs and just take note of what was in the corridor, what exists currently. We removed some site-specific land use permissions for uses that no longer exist, but we'll talk about those in more detail. So the first part of the zoning bylaw that we have proposed some changes to, which is the definition section. So because we added landscape or open space buffer along Highway 81 or center road. We just wanted to be very explicit in our definition. So previously there were no criteria for a landscape or open space buffer. Now we've included some wording, basically shall mean an unobstructed space at grade on which is suitable for growth and maintenance of grass, flowers, bushes, trees, other landscaping materials, both natural or artificial. It includes a surface, shouldn't be and surface work, sorry, a surface walkway or patio, but does not include any driveway, ramp, whether surface or not, any curved deck, retaining wall, parking area, or open space beneath or within any building or structure. So basically we want this open space that may have some landscaping accents, but we don't want parking there, we don't want there to be building there, we just want there to be effectively open space. So we just provided that definition for a little bit of clarification. This is what the expectations of the policy direction were.
So then, for instance, the Rona would be green space up to their retaining wall.
Likely. I can't think of what the road looks like.
Yeah, because the Rona has, their parking is quote unquote sunk. Great for snow in the wintertime.
Yeah, I'm curious how that's gonna work.
But they have, you know, a fairly significant retaining wall with green space from there to 81.
If I may, there would likely be another strip required there because that is where their actual property line is. That's the extent where the parking could start. So there would be landscaping of some other sort there. So there would have to be the buffer, the landscape requirement.
Okay.
So whether that, unless we consider the retaining wall itself, the landscaping.
Because we'll get into that later on here when we get into that 10% and 3 meters stuff.
So they would have been required to do some additional landscaping along the frontage of their property or at their entryway or somewhere in that area to hold.
It doesn't have to sit there, be in front of the whole property, though. It could be in a corner, it could be, right?
Well,
It would likely be along the whole frontage
Okay.
with their accesses delineated, but yeah, they would likely have had to put in some sort of more green space, bushes, some trees or something that would have been in another additional spot
Okay,
after
so
that.
basically they'd have to move back.
Essentially, yes, yes.
so this is just the general criteria of what we consider open space to be. If there's any suggestions whether or not you want the retaining wall included or not included, or if you want any other landscaping materials contemplated, we can certainly do that. We're just saying we really just want this separation, and within this separation, this is what we're hoping is it within it. Really, not much other than trees, grass. Continue. So the next amendment that we propose is that motel be changed a little bit. Currently, there's only a definition of motel, and it is pretty basic. It's saying that it's a building or group of buildings where sleeping accommodations with or without meals is provided to the public. In the last 6 months, we've received a proposal for a hotel now, which is a pretty bona fide development, and it includes aspects that are beyond what could be included within this motel definition. So we're proposing that hotel or motel be expanded to include any hotel, motel, inn, or lodge in one building or in 2 or more buildings used for the purposes of catering to the needs of the traveling public by supplying food and furnishings. So this is like any cafe or bistro, similar to what's being proposed, and furnishing sleeping accommodations. It may include permanent staff accommodation. The hotel may also provide uses and activities accessory to the principal accommodation function, including the eating establishment, dining room, entertainment activities, gift shop, and facilities to support business and industry, including convention facilities, trade shows, professional education and seminars, workshops, and public meetings. So it's just basically saying there's going to be additional space not used for sleeping accommodations. So in the one that they're proposing here, there might be a conference room, I think. There's definitely a pool. There's a bistro. Yeah, so beyond what the old motel definition said, we just wanted to, when Holiday Inn came in and applied for their site plan control, we said we would include them within the motel definition. So really we're just going back and expanding it for our benefit moving forward. We have the opportunity to.
I hope it works.
So after 6 years, we finally get something going there?
Potentially.
Potentially. There's no guarantee until they open some.
I hope they have deep pockets.
So the subsequent definition is shopping center, and it's probably not what you think of as a typical shopping center, but in your current zoning bylaw, it shall mean a building or group of buildings for commercial uses which are planned, designed, developed, and managed as a unit, having all off-street parking, so all your parking is on the site, and located on the same lot, with a total building area greater than 2,000 square meters. What we've proposed to do is basically just add that it not just be for commercial, but potentially also for office uses. So really what we're trying to discourage is the establishment of commercial plazas. That's not something seen favorably by Stratford-Caradoc under what they say should be the permitted uses. So we're really looking for standalone developments. The 2,000 square meters was a number that we struggled with, and whether or not there should be a number of units. So in the original definition we had 6 or more, but then we did the math, and I would actually have the floor area of each unit less than the 5,000 square feet. So then we took out the 6 to try and make the numbers work, but we left the 2,000 square meters. So we're definitely open to any opinions you may have. So what I think of it is currently Home Hardware has a building, it's about 1,700 square meters. So basically this clause, based on the wording that doesn't permit them in the commercial corridor, would mean no other commercial uses could establish on that property. So anything in excess of 2,000 square meters is, when there's more than one building, is called a shopping center. So any questions on that?
Any questions at all?
Just back up and run that over.
Yeah. I didn't want to be the stupid one.
Doesn't matter, that's okay. I've done a lot of times.
So, home hardware,
It's 17.
but
Under
you're
the
counting,
two.
in the store, but you're counting the.
No, just the store is 1,700.
Right, so.
It's small
but
buildings are accessory to the store, so they're the lumber yard, they're not a standalone use. So they couldn't go to, say, Rona can also develop on that site because then it would be a shopping center per se. But it's really commercial or office use, so when you see the hotel development, we're not contemplating that as a shopping center because you have the automotive use, the gas bar. You have potentially two eating establishments. So it's a little bit of a different scope. It's not one big comprehensive.
So then an example could possibly be the Rona site, because it's a commercial establishment and the OPP station is office.
Yes.
That would be considered a shopping center.
Yes, and I think shopping center might be the wrong word. Maybe a commercial plaza might be a better word. Because when I think of shopping plaza, I think of one enclosed building with multiple stores, or similar to where 9 Second Street is now, where there's multiple tenancies. So that's kind of my connotation of shopping center, but we were trying to use the language that was already within.
Commercial plaza is a much better.
Commercial plaza, yeah. Because we like to change from shopping center to commercial plaza.
Yeah.
So sorry, any feedback on the 2,000 square meters? Is that too little, too much? Basically, further down, we do have the introduction of minimum and maximum floor areas. So they do get quite generous, 4,000, 3,000, 4,000, 2,500. So we're basically saying you can't have 2 of those on a single site. I don't think there's any, other than perhaps the county property would be able to accommodate that. We could probably address that through site specifically.
Good.
Just backtrack on that. You said you would be allowed to be 2 of them on one site.
Yes. Because it would be in excess of 2,000, and then it would be a commercial plaza or shopping center.
Am I reading it wrong, or am I? So, because the way I read it is that on the same lot, a total building floor area greater than 2,000 square meters.
Yes, but nowhere within your zoning bylaw or official plan is a shopping center actually permitted.
Oh, okay. So that's what we're saying. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I guess we've not explicitly said that in the previous iteration of the OPA that said shopping centers were not permitted anywhere.
Yeah.
Actually, did so yeah, one of the points is shopping centers and small scale freestanding retail and office uses are not permitted within the commercial corridor. So the OP direction was that shopping centers are not permitted. Again, I think it's a competition factor. So we're clarifying.
Commercial plaza,
Commercial plaza.
get that out of your mind, and
Yeah.
it doesn't look like a contravention of the agreement.
So is 2,000 square meters sufficient, or is it?
So how big, I'm thinking about it, how big is, say, like the Canadian Tire in Strathroy, or like a larger, or like the Walmart, or how?
Well, it's all, you
Walmart
got
is
2,000
quite
square
large.
feet.
Yeah.
Oh,
So,
But there are provisions that for retail uses, that there's already a maximum. So again, notwithstanding this, you could have a building supplies retail outlet of 4,000 square meters.
right.
Furniture outlet, 3,000 square meters.
so shouldn't we remove it that it's not a building? Shouldn't it be a group of buildings?
Okay.
Because if we're talking about, I'm just thinking about it, if we're saying in the definition it's a building, which means that if we were to have a Walmart there, that would be considered as a shopping
So
center.
we'd never be able to build a Walmart there, because that won't happen. Strasbourg would never allow it.
No.
Not if we included it as a building.
No, I know, but I'm
But
just,
that's a good point, is that it's multiple, although then they get into multiple tenancies within a single building, which is I think why we have a
okay.
building.
So are we sticking with a total building floor area greater than 2,000 then?
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just very confusing when you really think about it.
It is. So these are definitions, and then
Yeah.
the provisions of commercial corridor will supersede these for certain uses.
Yeah.
Right.
The definition needs to be clear. That's why it's a definition.
Yes. So, do you have any proposed?
No.
Sorry, I'm the one that brought it up. so-
No, I understand
That's
what
why we're
the
here.
confusion it was. It's something we can take back and look at, because I do understand
Yeah.
we have certain floor maximums, and then we have a completely different maximum kind of thrown in there as well.
Right.
So we've contemplated them separately. Perhaps they need to be looked at, I guess, more comparatively.
Why do we have this 2,000 meters in when we have all these on the other end?
Because you had 2,000 meters before, so.
Okay.
That's really the rationale. Well, we can change it, we can increase it if you so choose.
So we want to, I'm starting to feel like I've stepped into a vortex. So we're changing shopping center to commercial plaza
Yes.
because we're not allowing any shopping centers.
No.
So do we need to have any kind of definition? Or do we just not bother with the definition for shopping center and pretend we don't know?
But then should we define
That's
commercial
what we've done for
plaza?
10 years.
Well, if we use this definition for commercial plaza,
But then,
because this is talking about greater than 2,000 meters, so if we're not allowing it, then it doesn't matter what size it is. But if we're allowing it, then it
And it has
matters.
to meet the
Then it
maximum
has
or
to
the
be this-
minimum, yeah.
But we need it in, if we don't allow it, we need to say what we don't allow. That's why we need to have it in there.
But if we're not gonna allow shopping centers at all, then it doesn't matter.
But what is a shopping center?
Right.
Yeah, so you have to
No, you
either,
gotta leave that in. We have to leave that in.
but a commercial plaza, is it a commercial plaza now that's not allowed?
Yes.
Okay, Now I've stepped out of the vortex.
But it is allowed.
The open commercial plaza is allowed, right?
No.
No.
No?
So in the official plan, a shopping center, which we're now calling a commercial
Plaza.
is not allowed.
Is
And
not
that's
allowed.
defined as this. And what we need to determine is 2,000 square meters appropriate to then define it as a shopping center or not.
I'm totally confused now.
Am
We're
I?
not allowing
Am I right?
anything bigger than 2,000.
2,000 square
meters.
meters.
We
No,
are.
But we are.
We are.
We are,
Assuming.
because on the other end, we are.
Because we got maximum of 4.
Yes.
So why do we have this?
I'm totally lost.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
Do
that's
you
what-
want us to take that one back and do some more
Yeah.
digging?
Well, I think if we're not allowing a commercial plaza that's bigger than 2,000 feet, or square meters, that's one thing, but if we're allowing stuff that's bigger than 2,000 meters,
That's
then we
what
shouldn't
we
be calling this something we're not doing.
Kathy, you want to add your thoughts
My
on
thoughts?
that? Yeah. Just because you've
Well,
been.
I would just like to see it defined as a minimum size, because we do need to deter people who are adamant that something undersized would be allowed there. We need something to start with, so that we know, you know, this is as big as you can go there, this is as small as you can go there in the definition, so that we can clearly put it into a category, and we can not turn people away, but we can discourage them from pursuing something that is not going to happen there, regardless of what they call it. So the number there is kind of important, so we can deter people from pursuing something that isn't going to happen.
Or we can just
It's-
provide them better information.
Or better information, one or the other,
Well,
but
yeah,
something
you might-
needs
right,
to be
if
there.
We're not allowed to have it happen regardless. What's the use of having any
Because they
size?
know what they're not allowed to do.
Pardon
Yeah.
me?
They
We
have
have
to
to
know
tell
what
them,
they're not allowed to
Yeah.
do.
Well, then can we
Yeah.
explain that to whoever's applying for whatever, that you're not allowed to build this here or do this?
Because if you tell me I'm not allowed to build a commercial plaza, and a commercial plaza is bigger than 2,000 feet, then I'll say, oh, so I can build a retail place under 2,000 meters.
No, that's 4,000.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's a discrepancy there, I will,
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Could we, in a way, I'm just thinking about this. The concern is that anything over that 2,000 is a commercial plaza. And in that plaza, if it's, say, 1,999 square meters, could you have multiple then units in it that are under that
2,000.
465 square meters?
Oh, now you're bringing in the 460.
Sorry, I
Yeah,
just...
no, that's a good point. So that's where I see it more of a plaza, is that I think there could be potential for multiple tenancies over the 475 or
465.
465 and less than a certain number.
Okay.
So maybe 2,000 is not the right, because you get 2.5 or 3. So maybe the 2,000 needs to change, because we kind of have those situations existing right now at 9 Second Street. But that's the relationship that we were trying to establish, is that how many units comprise a
A shopping
plaza. Yeah,
Sure,
and I
plaza,
think
yeah.
that it could be more, it is more than one tenancy. But then how many tenancies, and how, they all have to be at least, or we recommend that each is at least 465. But how many of those then equal a plaza?
So the question I asked, if you didn't understand. So right now, the reason we are doing all this was to figure out the minimum square meters for a building, for a unit. So what I was asking was, is that if we had a building bigger than that 465 square meters, can you put multiple businesses within them? So like a shopping, like a, I don't know, just, mall, a shopping, and a, what am I trying to say?
So, okay, let's take a McNaughton's, for example.
Yes.
They've got their lumber and retail here, then they have an LCBO, and then they have an M&M Meats, and then they have something else. At what point,
Is it a plaza?
when is it a plaza and when is
When
it
is
not
it
a
a
plaza?
plaza?
And that's what we need to know, because it's one big building which have been divided up. So
Yeah.
what is a plaza? Is a plaza 465 square meters? Is it 2 of those? Is it 3 of those? And is it something that is individual frontage or can be divided up inside? That's what we need to have a definition of what that is. What do we consider a shopping plaza?
Or another
commercial
example
plaza.
would be in Strathroy where they have the Krabby Joe's and there's where
Gerber's
Dr. Cameron.
Gerber's and
Oh,
Dr.
yeah,
Cameron
yeah,
used to be,
okay, yeah,
and that
now
type
I'm
of thing.
starting to get it.
So, at what point is that a plaza?
Yeah.
And do we need to have a minimum floor area for each unit?
I think
That's already in there.
465.
That we're already saying
I
that.
think we have to.
Yeah, but if
maintain
we're
that.
not allowed to build any of these on that corridor anyway,
But you might be able to get away with 2 or 3 if
Yes.
you say a shopping center is more than 3 or more than 4.
okay.
I
Right?
think once,
All right, then we
once
gotta
you've
leave it in.
gotten to 4, you're definitely a plaza, and I think you'll get kickback, like when you bring it out to the public. I think if you put 3 in it, they're gonna call it a plaza.
Okay, let's determine the size on it then.
And then the size can be ranging because if it's 2, say, say building supplies, so you have a Home Depot attached, not that it would likely happen, attached to a Lowe's, those can each be up to 4,000, so now you're potentially at 8,000 square meters.
Right, so now we're looking at these 2,000, this is where we're looking at. Am I
Yes.
correct?
Yeah.
So what are we gonna determine the right size?
So is a shopping center more than 2 in excess of a certain amount of square footage, of total square footage, or is it more than 3? Like, I think there's 2 components. First, the number of units,
Number of units.
Yes,
or it can be one building. I think it's the number of divisions that is critical. And the second aspect is what's the maximum total size? Because my fear is that you see the old Targets that used to be a Target, and now they're 3 or 4 different things. So if we let a Walmart in and say Walmart doesn't succeed, then we either have this big empty space that can never be filled by anything with the same footprint as Walmart, and then we're prohibiting them for cutting it into smaller sections.
So, for example, the Westcast building, which is the Huron Produce, if it would have sold to someone, we need to determine, like someone else, and they want to divide it up, how many units could actually be in there.
right,
Exactly.
good point.
I don't think that we should go with a number. I think we should go with the number of units.
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
my thought. I don't think
Yeah,
we
I
should go
think
with.
you're right.
I don't think we should go with the size. I think we should say so
Plaza,
many
yeah.
units
Yeah.
equal a plaza.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, because if you look at
Yeah.
Home Hardware in Watford, it's actually a hardware store with a beauty salon attached.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think
Husband
you're
and
right,
wife.
good point.
So
Yeah,
then
I agree.
is it more than 2 as a plaza, or is it more than 3 a plaza, or what's that?
I think once you
Original.
get to 3, it's gonna be a plaza.
So 3 or more?
3 or more, yeah.
Okay, so let's just think about this now. That 9 Second Street, which is the old Marshalls.
But that's existing use,
Yes.
so they're allowed,
Yes.
minus that middle unit that we don't know what they're using it for.
Yeah.
But that, there's some
Sorry.
caveats, but
Yeah.
in principle that would be a commercial plaza, because you have the dog washing, the winemaking, the baking unit, and the automobile station all in a single.
So you take your dog for a bath, go and make your wine,
Get a piece of
and get a
pizza,
pizza at the same time.
fill your car.
Yeah.
There it is.
So let's stay on track here,
Sorry,
we're here
yeah.
till midnight.
So
I
So,
would prefer the units over the size because
Yes.
they can reconfigure their size differently. Whereas the units are what we're really looking at, and the size of each unit is going to be determined by the use of each unit.
3 units,
Yes.
yes.
Units, but no greater than the maximum floor area permitted under the CC zone. So if it's 2,000 or 3,000 in the CC zone, then that's the maximum floor area for your unit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's the number 3 then,
3 or more.
3 or more?
Take your song.
Are we saying this is or is not permitted? Because I'm getting 2 different feelings. Somebody's saying, well, this is not permitted, this is, but I don't see that written here.
So it's in the official plan, that, under section 3.3.4.2, that shopping centers and small-scale freestanding retail and office uses are not permitted within the commercial corridor. The first aspect of that is so that it doesn't compete with the highway commercial in Shawford-Caradoc, and the second is so that it doesn't compete with the downtown. So we're trying to implement, provide clarifications. We don't include definitions within the official plan. It's typically within the zoning bylaws. Zoning bylaws is used to amend. We're just connecting the two in this case.
Yeah, and then it's the zoning bylaw though.
Well,
Yeah. Satisfied. I am.
Are we,
I was
in
still
the
confused.
official plan, are we going to change that shopping center to
that
commercial
particular
plaza?
commercial lot.
Yeah, I've noted that. If that's
Okay.
Yeah.
just for being consistent.
But what I'm saying is, it should either say it is permitted or it shall not be permitted.
So,
I'm still confused. I can't get my head around this.
so in our official plan, it says that shopping centers, which we're now going to call commercial plazas,
Yeah.
are not permitted.
Okay.
And then that is being defined in our zoning bylaw, because that's what our official plan says it's going to be, going to be outlined in our zoning bylaw. So in our zoning bylaw, has a definition as to what that is. And we need to determine what that is, and once that's determined, if it's so many units or if it's so big, that's then a shopping center or a commercial plaza,
So it's
and
not allowed.
therefore it's not allowed.
Right.
Yeah.
So basically, yeah, then you're looking at, I go with Mary Ann's, no more than 3 units.
So no more than 3 or
Yeah, so I wanted to make
3
sure.
or more.
No, in my mind, you should be able to have
Over 2?
3.
You can have 3.
That's my thought. I don't know if that's what you were thinking.
Oh, I was thinking once it's 3, it's definitely
Plaza.
a plaza.
So then you're basically saying 2,
Two.
only 2.
2.
2 or more.
What if it's 2?
No.
2
No.
is
No.
okay.
2 is okay.
2.
2,
But
and then they have
are
the
we
minimum
saying-
criteria under the zoning bylaw based on the type of unit that it is.
Yes.
This is saying we're not allowing buildings bigger than 2,000 square meters.
As a shopping center or a commercial plaza.
So we're
And
scratching the 2,000 because that.
you scratch the
Yeah.
2,000, we have to figure out how many
Now
units.
we're using units.
Okay, so
And-
greater than 3, or 2,
No.
No.
greater than 2 units?
Great. Okay, so it depends. How many units do we want to have allowed? 1 is good, obviously. 2 is good. 3 is that?
No. Not 3.
Not 3. I think 2 is sufficient because you're not really, there's not many that are gonna have more than 2 uses based on the size that they would be required. I can't see where anybody would build, like you're getting into a rather large mall than when you're getting into 5,000 square feet minimum for those type of things.
Really, the only property I can see this having issues is the Cuddy property because it's so large.
Yeah, there would only be the one that potentially could have that problem, and it's on the west side, which isn't under consideration right now, but that would be probably the only place that it would be able to fit, would be to have anything 3, so yeah.
Joy, what
one
should make it
this one
3 then?
up here.
Because they're saying that the commercial plaza isn't allowed unless it's only 2 units. But then if you go to 3 units, you're not allowed, right?
That's what I'm hearing.
Mm-hmm.
Or is 3 okay? And once you get over 3, then it's.
And I guess the reason I keep getting confused is because we're dealing with 2 separate documents.
Well, yeah, look
Yeah.
at the zoning bylaw as your tool for the plan. The plan gives you direction, but this gives you your tools and
To
explains.
say no or yes or whatever. Am I right?
But then it should say no here.
Well, then we'd have to say no to everything. So no
Yeah.
residential, no farms, no.
Yeah,
So we always,
No, no,
we
we
say
get it.
yes, we try to be positive and say you can do this.
yes.
So if it's not included on that list, then it's a no.
Right. And then everything has to be exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
And you don't
Or
wanna
if
do
it
that.
wasn't included on the list, you could come in and ask for an official plan amendment to include it, and then
Yes.
she would do the zoning bylaw according to what you set out that you wanted in that.
But it's unlikely that we get an OPA for a shopping center, I would believe, because that's the intent of the servicing agreement would be circumvented
Yeah.
then.
Yeah.
So,
So 2,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
2 it is.
I just have one question.
Oh, if you confuse us again.
I'll ask
we're-
Christy the question directly. For example, where the Tim Hortons is in the proposed hotel.
yeah,
So, say they do another restaurant there as well, and say an office use.
yes.
Is a restaurant considered as a commercial establishment?
Generally, yes. So maybe excluding eating establishments and automotive related uses? Would that be reasonable?
I would say excluding the eating especially.
Because I would not call really a hotel a
Yeah.
commercial use or an office use. But then, it would be.
Or gas stations as well?
Yeah,
right?
so excluding eating.
But the gas station wouldn't go there because we got the 750-meter circle.
That one's already in the set, that's the one for, that's why we have a 750-meter circle
Yeah,
potentially.
because basically that's gonna put the kibosh on the Marshall one.
So excluding eating establishments, automotive related service. Anything else that would be excluded? Hotel or motel? Is that okay? And we'll prepare some wording,
Yeah.
to encompass.
Well, you're just talking now excluded, so that means,
They're allowed. They're excluded from the prohibition.
Carry on. Got this one done.
So as if we have 2 units, they could have a third, basically, a third unit that's a gas bar
Right.
Or a restaurant?
or a restaurant.
Yes.
So it's really it's really the retail. Maybe we take out commercial and say retail or office.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we have that defined somewhere?
Commercial retail. I would just use the definitions for building supply, retail outlet, furniture supply, retail outlet, home and office
Okay.
supply store. So is that a better way of approaching it? Is that it's a commercial retail or office instead of exclusions?
Yeah.
Are we okay on this one? Can we proceed?
I'm okay on it. Yep.
Okay, so moving on.
Once you get the revised one, you'll figure it out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Sure.
So, we're going for public consultation, and
yeah.
we'll have the opportunity to get comments and feedback again at that time. So if there's anything you're still dissatisfied with, this isn't the final hurrah, there's still lots of time. So next, section that we did, some significant changes to were the general provisions, beginning with the holding zone provisions. So we proposed to delete 4 holding symbols. So H9, H10, H11, H14, we won't actually delete them, we'll just delete these contents and reuse them in the future. But each of these basically state that it's either going to be subject to a plan of subdivision that's no longer applicable in our opinion, that servicing be confirmed, or that a site plan is applicable. So by including the policies in the official plan that say all new development is subject to site plan control and servicing, we were able to eliminate these as redundancies. So there were some site-specific ones, the H13, I know Jeff had some concerns about. It was for a retail market study. We didn't touch ones that were very specific to the property they were being applied for. It was the general ones that we opted to stroke out, and that's really just to clean up the document a little bit. Is there any questions with respect to the holding provisions? on, the next section that we proposed amendment to was section 5.23, and these are parking requirements. So in the zoning bylaw, there's currently parking requirements for barrier-free. They are embedded within section 5.23.9. So it says, in addition to parking space requirements, you shall provide one parking space for physically disabled. So there's been some legislative changes in terms of language that we use and the number required. So basically we've just reflected that in the addition of section 5.23.13 and 5.23.14 and 15. There's a slight renumbering due to the number 9 being removed. And basically these are pretty across the board barrier-free parking requirements that you'd see in most urban municipalities. We are moving towards, you will notice there's quite a significant amount of general provisions. Because of the amount of development we're seeing right now, as I explained earlier today, we're trying to say, when people come back to us and we ask for things, like the hotel development, they said, well, what are your queue requirements? We don't have any. So it kind of gives them the free-for-all to do whatever they want. So by having these provisions in our zoning bylaw, it gives us better guidance to provide to them. So it may look like we're restricting, but I think we're really trying to get some consistent development that is comparable to other established urban areas. So this is the first one in a series of amendments, and these are largely based on legislative changes. So is there any questions?
So would Kemmerling be in compliance with these numbers?
Yes. Yes, he has very few parking stalls on site, like less than 50, so he would only be required to provide 2, and there's definitely 2 there. So when most architects prepare plans now, they know, or engineers, they know what these requirements are. We're just putting it there for the one-off developers, like say Hassett Clark didn't retain a consultant. If he were to come in and say, what are your requirements? We now have something to say, here you go, these, you don't have to do the legwork, it's in our bylaw. Any questions with respect to barrier-free parking stalls? Okay. So the next one we've touched on slightly, and that was greenhouses. So greenhouses were originally a permitted use under the current zoning bylaw. We've maintained them as a permitted use, notwithstanding Shaftesbury Paradox indicating that they don't support high water uses. We've just basically identified some criteria for them. This only applies to the commercial corridor zone, so these provisions would not apply in the agricultural area, the agricultural land use designation. There really shouldn't be greenhouses anywhere else other than the commercial and the agricultural. So we're basically just saying there's a minimum lot area, a maximum lot coverage, so you can't have a whole area of greenhouses, and that no manure or compost may be stored on site. So we didn't put a lot there, we just basically said that we wanted sufficient area, don't cover the whole space, and no manure place.
Okay. So then, and this is in a totally different municipality, so George could not put 80 acres of greenhouse on the 100 acres beside the dump of Watford.
Well, this is only in the
It's
commercial
in
corridor.
agricultural.
We're only talking about this.
This is commercial corridor, that was agricultural,
Okay.
so.
So you couldn't put 100% of any one of these
No.
lots in greenhouses. We're saying pretty much a smaller scale greenhouse is permitted, and it's basically, we associate a larger scale with more water use. So it was kind of a trade-off when we were discussing. If we maintain greenhouse permissions, it just has to be a little bit smaller, it can't be a whole
Right.
site.
Right, good.
But we've got to grow up already, so.
Outside of the commercial corridor.
That's in the agriculture.
Yeah.
Right. So if somebody applied, let's say I did, I wanted the greenhouse on my property or something, that's totally different from this, right?
Yeah.
That's, so,
So that would apply, say, Home Hardware, for example, decided in the back part of their property, they wanted to establish a greenhouse, they will their own to sell. So this criteria would apply to them, because all they would be able to do
yeah,
there.
good.
So the next one is a series of provisions applicable to automotive service stations, automotive repair, automotive sales. So the whole amount of the standing clause basically says there may be permissions elsewhere in this bylaw, but these apply first and foremost. So these provisions apply. The first is that no service bay, car wash, openings, or vacuum stations may be located within 10 meters of the lot line that abuts non-commercial or non-industrial zone or use, or as otherwise may be required by the service bay, car wash, opening, or vacuum station. So we're just looking for a little bit of increased separation. We're seeing an instance now where we're seeing quite a few car washes, and most of them are adjacent to non-commercial and non-residential or non-industrial areas. So we just want to make sure, or uses, we just want to make sure there's a little bit more separation just as a courtesy. We don't want 8-foot fences everywhere. We do want some noise attenuation and some light mitigation. But the 10 meters is definitely open to discussion as to whether or not council feels it's appropriate.
So McEwen and Camerling are both commercial. So then the 10 meters wouldn't apply to that car wash because it's closer than 10 meters to the lot line.
That's correct.
But
So it's
it
more-
might make a difference up along McDonald Street there at the back of the lot. So
Yeah.
if somebody wants to stick something back there, then you wanna keep them away from the houses.
Yes, that's
No, that makes
sense.
more so the intent.
Yeah.
Is where
No, I think
there's a
that's
couple undeveloped lots right outside of the residential area, so we're talking like right here,
Yeah.
that would be foremost importance. There is potential, the hotel is a commercial use, the existing motel is a commercial use, and they're proposing a car wash here. We have been looking at the separation, and it's definitely not 10 meters. So we have requested that there be attenuation provided. So these policies aren't or regulations are not yet in effect. So we've had to use other means to mitigate any offsite impacts that may be caused by that door going up and down. So is that acceptable to? Further to this, we've indicated that where a service bay, car wash opening, vacuum station, outdoor loading area, garbage storage, or stacking lane is located in a yard that abuts a non-commercial or non-industrial zone or use, that service bay, car wash opening, vacuum station, outdoor loading area, garbage storage, or a stacking lane shall be screened from view from the non-commercial or non-industrial zone by a solid fence or planting strip with a height minimum of 2 meters. So again, that's just that attenuation.
Secretary Stockman?
What's a stacking lane?
That's like when you go through the drive-through and all those cars line up, like when you go around Tim Hortons. So anything after the board is a stacking lane.
I thought that was a queue.
So the queue, I believe, is from the board forward. So the stacking is the people that haven't been served yet.
There you go.
I think it's a technical.
Okay, move. Okay, that works really.
So is that okay, the request to include some provisions with respect to planting strips? And
Yep.
So the next one is a pump island may be located within any required front or exterior side yard, provided the minimum distance between any portion of the pump island and any lot line is 5 meters. And where it's a corner lot, there's a site visibility triangle maintained. You guys already have provisions for site visibility triangles. This is basically, we don't typically allow a lot of development in the front yard or the exterior side yards of corner lots or any lot. This is giving them an exemption because you can kind of see through them. It doesn't really make sense to put them behind. So it'd be like asking McEwen's that's going in to put their C-store at the road and put their pumps behind. We're saying it's acceptable to do it as they're currently proposed. So it's just offering basically an exemption to the typical standard of no development in the front or side. Any questions? The next one is where more than 3 automotive service stations currently exist or have received site plan approval within a 750-meter radius of the subject site, a retail market demand analysis report shall be submitted to the township that demonstrates a market need for a new automotive service station to the satisfaction of the township. So we've included this provision because we've gone from one gas station in the commercial corridor to proposals for 3 additional. We have 1 under construction and proposals for 2 additional gas bars. Before, on one side of the road, there's also 2 One existing, and I think one more proposed within the first kilometer of Strathroy-Caradoc. So there's potential for 6 gas stations in a very small area. We just think gas stations are not the highest and best use of land. We appreciate that we're close to the 402 and that we're close to residential areas in Strathroy-Caradoc, but we have to draw the line somewhere, and we felt that beyond that, we'll start looking for some justification as to why another gas bar is necessary. Previously, gas bars were quite hard to remediate, so there was one previously up here at the corner of Egremont Center. They had to go through an environmental, I think a phase 1 and a phase 2. I'm not sure to what extent it's been remediated. Things are a lot easier to remediate now because they're better holding tanks, but it does have long-term implications on the use in terms of record of site condition. So it's a little harder than just saying an old retail store to a new retail store. It's an old gas station. Now you have to go through a process.
Different. Yeah, I agree.
So we've included the 750 again as just a number, open to any thoughts. We've also included 3 as a number, just a starting point, open to any thoughts council may have.
That's good.
So this then does kill the Marshall proposal?
Which one's Marshall proposal?
Non-second corner.
No, so
No.
none of this is in effect, and they're currently trying to go through site plan control. So we will have a transitional clause that basically says anything that was initiated prior to the adoption is able to continue under the existing policy framework. But anything, say, a piece of land on the Cuddy side, or on the west side, I should say, decides that they want to do a new gas bar next May, hopefully after this is adopted and in place, then they would be subject to it because there's already
You've got Corderos, you've got McEwen.
Yeah.
and the hotel site does include a potential gas bar as well. That's what we said as well.
Well, in
There
town.
must be too much money in gas.
In town, they went from, 4 to 7 or something like that. Yeah.
No, I agree, 3 is enough. Yep.
So it is 750 meters, but that covers a good portion of the commercial corridor, particularly when you have McEwen and
Corderos.
Carreras in the middle, and then potential hotel at the closer to the north. It should actually encompass most of the potential developable area.
So that's sufficient.
So in our opinion, it should be.
Okay.
If council wants it to increase
No,
to
no.
a kilometer, we can do that too.
So what you just said was where, say, McEwen's is right now, that would pretty much reach from...
Yeah, it extends almost the full length. This would be an overlap. It would really be maybe a small portion of what we're proposing to change that would be uncovered, but the ones in Strathroy-Caradoc would extend out 750 meters from there. So I think for the most part, the 750 meters should be sufficient in covering all of the land. So the final point in this section is referring back to when we were talking about automotive sales uses. So they're exempt from the required parking area and parking location provisions contained within the commercial corridor, and that's what we want to minimize in the front yard and put in the side and rear. So it's just giving you provisions that it's acceptable if you're an automotive sales use in particular to utilize that space. So moving on, the next portion that we did was queue space requirements. This is driven by the amount of interest we've had in eating establishments and gas bars in the commercial corridor. So the gas bars have the queues for the car washes, and then the drive-through restaurants being Tim Hortons, and then a drive-through associated with the hotel development and potentially on an adjacent site as well, again, all on the east side. So we've taken these and tweaked them from some urban direction, but basically it provides some different land use options and the number of required spaces. So this is like 3 for banks or automated tellers, 3 before each teller. The washing station, so the car wash would be 4 before each wash bay. So that's just basically the length of the lane leading up to it is, in our opinion, should be this amount. Drive-through, 5 before or at the order board, 4 between the order board and the pickup window, and 2 after the pickup window. Just kind of separating it all so that we're not getting a huge queue.
You'll say you're in the stacking lane, I'm in the queue.
Same thing.
It is quite similar. And then all other drive-through uses. So we've indicated that a queuing study should be required when projected volumes are greater or equal to 60 vehicles per hour. Yeah, you'd be surprised how many go through. So we have requested for the hotel site a traffic impact assessment of how all the traffic generation and the queuing is going to work in relationship to each of the uses. So we've already quasi-implemented it, but again, 60 vehicles, any of the numbers above, open to discussion if council so chooses.
So Timmy's complies?
I'm not sure. I haven't.
You ever taken the wheel out there and measured
I
it?
have not.
I
have
know
not.
that they quite often have
Yeah.
6 or 7 vehicles.
I used to be a planner for Tim Hortons, and at one point in time we were designing 22 queue spaces behind the order, a stacking lane of 22 spaces. So here we definitely don't have that many, and it's helped now that they've split. Helped, hindered. It's depends on how you see it, but there are
Did that double order.
yeah, a little bit more space to divide it up.
I would say Tim Hortons has, I would say they comply. In my head, I'm trying to figure it out, but I would say that they
It
do.
looks like a long lineup when I'm coming over the hill and I see it. It looks like a long lineup.
Yeah.
And you never see people out waiting in the parking lot.
No.
You occasionally see a person trying to go the wrong way,
Yeah,
trying
I've
to
seen
get
that.
out and go through the drive-through and use that as an exit.
Mhm.
Yeah. So then the queue space standards are basically just buffering, dimensions, and basically we've indicated that the queue spacings can be included in the overall parking requirement for that site because people are using the drive-through instead of parking their car and going into the same Tim Hortons. Any questions about any of those requirements?
So, number D.
Yep.
The house there, the old BDO
Yep.
place, was that considered commercial or residential?
So
Because we're talking 10 meters from the lot line, while that one is less than 10 meters from that lot line.
yes, so it does say industrial zone or use, and the word use is included there specifically to accommodate situations where previously there was an existing use, being a house, in most cases a dwelling, and to increase the setback. That property's up for lease or for sale, so the interest we've had is another commercial, bona fide commercial use. So I think that the 10 meters would be okay. We don't have these provisions currently, so they would just have to meet the minimum side yard setback, which I think is 3 or 6 meters in the commercial zone currently. So this wouldn't have applied, but yes, moving forward, we would have expected them to be pushed in a little bit more just to give some privacy.
So that property right now is zone CC, and it's also designated as a commercial corridor, so it shouldn't, that wouldn't affect. Yeah.
Provided, yeah, the use, the new use should be a commercial use.
Okay, it was a commercial, well, it was an offshoot of a residential house with an attached business.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like whoever it was that had the house also had the.
Yeah, it's like a home
Yeah.
business
Yeah.
and an office there. So it would have been, in our opinion, primarily residential use because it's a residential structure. So I would have said, had these provisions put in place at the time, we would have expected to squeeze in a little bit more and give them a landscaped area and a little more separation. But because it's an existing use, there is a developer looking at redeveloping that site for an eating establishment, that would be a commercial use, and that 10 meters wouldn't necessarily apply. Can I move on? So the next component is the commercial corridor zone. So this is basically the zone that matches the commercial land use designation. I think all properties within the commercial corridor zone, with the exception of the ones that are currently zoned urban residential, or in designation are currently zone commercial corridor. So this is where we had to make sure that our permitted uses really reflected what the OP said. And we're surprised that we didn't actually have to scratch a whole lot of them. We just had to add some criteria. So with respect to automotive repair, automotive sales, automotive service station, we just added some of that general criteria in the general provisions. We added the existing use so that we don't have to go through another zoning bylaw amendment to recognize uses such as Mr. Hassan's contractor's yard. We clarified the criteria for greenhouses. We've added hotel. And then we've also included permission for an accessory office within a main building. So what we were seeing was that the gas bar people would come in and say, well, offices aren't permitted, but a part of my gas bar operation is an office. So we wanted to make sure that office use was included within the scope of our consideration so that people didn't think that it was being discouraged.
But wasn't the main use.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So the main use was what where the concern lie. So we said accessory uses. We included some provisions a little later on in the section. Said they're permitted within the main building to a certain floor area to a certain percentage. Any questions about the range of permitted uses? Not a lot of changes. We're actually expecting to see more.
For accessory office, so it should say, it says with, so should that say within?
Yeah.
And then with the existing use as of January blank, is that going to be the day that we pass?
Yes.
Okay, adopt.
Yes. So it will be, because once the appeal period is over, it goes into effect the day it was passed here. That will be
Inserted in there.
it may be XXXX because we don't know if it's actually going to be in January, but it should be maybe as the day of passing of this bylaw. It can't be that because it's not the full bylaw.
Yeah.
So that's why I think we've included just the date,
Okay.
but it will likely not be January because our public meeting is just in January. So.
Okay.
But if there's no questions about that, we can move on. Regulations. We've done quite a bit of work within the regulations section. So with respect to the minimum lot size, lot area, lot width, we haven't touched that. On this first page, the only addition that's been made is that minimum landscape open space criteria of 10%. And that will largely be adjacent to the front property line. So 10% on these lots really isn't that much once you put in that front landscape buffer. Any questions about the 10%?
So further on, we're talking 3 meters.
Yes.
So is that 3 meters on top of the 10%, or is the 3 meters part of that 10%?
It's part of the 10%. So it has to be a minimum of 3 meters. So if you go along your entire frontage of 3 meters and it's actually 12%, then your requirement is 12%. But for most times when we get a site plan, they'll actually indicate on the site plan what the component of landscape open space or open space actually is, because it's kind of tricky for us to figure it out without going on site and having detailed mapping. So the 10% is fairly typical, I would say, in my experience. So for the next 2 sections, we basically just reiterated that all new development, redevelopment requires confirmation of adequate municipal services, and that they're subject to site plan control, and that a site plan agreement is required. Typically, we don't repeat what we say in the OP in the zoning bylaw, but in this case, we want to make sure that it's quite clear that any development or redevelopment is subject to these 2 things. There will be very few exclusions. Parking requirements were previously there. We've just beefed them up a little bit. For the most part, they're in accordance with section 5.23 of the bylaw, but we indicated that the maximum parking area should be no more than 40%, and that's really so that there's a primary use to the land, being 60% of the land. So 60% is your buildings, 60% is or part of that is your landscaping. We just don't want 75% to be impervious paved surface, half empty of cars most of the time. So is there any questions with the 40%? None?
So there's only 10% left. Because you got 40% maximum parking, you have 40% maximum lot coverage, and you've got 10% landscape, so there's only 10% left.
Well, that's maximum. You can have less than 40% of your area parking.
So we could add them up to 100%, put your lot coverage at 50%, but 40% was what was there, so we just left it And then for the parking location, as indicated when we talked about the official plan, the parking areas should be in the front and exterior side yards and be limited to 25% of the permitted parking area. So of that 40%, 25% of it can be located within the front and exterior side yards. So we're allowing some, but you can't have all of your parking in front of your building or on your exterior side yards. We want some of it as much as possible hidden, but we'll allow up to 25% if that's okay with council.
Just one question, just for clarification. So then, the front would be the front of from the front of the building to the front of the. So then, you are still allowed to have. There's no minimum or there's no maximum for the interior side yard.
So that would be the other 75% of the 40%.
Which would be anything behind the building.
Yes, or
Yeah. Behind the building and on the side.
Or if you have interior side yards, so if you're no frontage, yeah, you can have it in the sides or in the back.
Yeah.
So there is some visibility at the front, and then we're trying to
Get it to the side and the back.
Yeah. Any questions? And then, so moving on, minimum building floor area. This is probably one of the more critical points. This would have been kind of the scope of recommendation 1 of our report. So we looked in the zoning bylaw and saw what areas may have been causing the issue. So we've identified the building supplies retail outlet, the furniture retail outlet, the home and auto supply store, which is another retail outlet, and the office, and we've established those to each be 465 square meters or the 5,000 square feet. That has kind of been discussed as a general number that's acceptable to both Adelaide Metcalfe and Strasbourg Caradoc. So we've basically just taken those discussions and formalized them by putting in a regulation in the bylaw. In addition to that, we've included the minimum building floor area for accessory. So it should probably be more fitting under maximum because it's a maximum of 25% of the floor area or 30 square meters. So we're not encouraging a significant area. We're saying 30 square meters can be this office. So it really is intended to be accessory to the principal use. Any questions? Okay, so moving on, maximum building floor area. We just stroke retail food store because there's actually nowhere in this document that provides permission for a retail sales store. That was site specific, I believe, on one of the one of the properties. So we didn't feel it was necessary to include it as a general regulation. Moving down, the center road gateway design. So this may be a spot where there may be some room for input. Where development or redevelopment is proposed along Center Road, so we previously said that this may apply to all county roads. Within the municipal service area, each proposal shall be required to include the 3-meter wide landscape strip and a landscape plan. So is it council's wish to have that applicable to all county roads within the municipal service area or just Center Road? It would be most consistent if it were all county roads.
Yeah, easier to administrate.
And if we're not, then we should change what we said in the OP.
I think so.
But then that would mean that I would think it should only be if there's a site plan.
So it would only be at the time of development or redevelopment, which would be site plan.
Yeah, we're not gonna tell Clark Castle they have to go now and landscape.
No.
I tried to, but he said no.
Oh, you can charm.
Okay, but this is still only the CC zone, so yeah, it'd be all. Sorry, in my head I was thinking beyond when you said all county roads. My head
No,
went,
no, we're not gonna move it
Yeah.
down
Yeah, that
the
makes
Irwin
sense.
Road or anything.
So beyond
Just within.
Yeah. For all roads.
So then the next component of the CC zone provisions that we amended were the special provisions, and this is where we saw again redundancies. So there were special permissions in the CC 1-1 zone. Those uses have either not come to fruition. they wouldn't be permitted to connect to servicing, or the range of uses is already permitted within the zoning bylaw. So the ones that we stroked were CC1, CC3, CC4, and CC7. And those can be found in the accompanying schedules as to where they're located. They've all been proposed to be rezoned to a commercial corridor, just a general commercial corridor with no site specifics. Any questions about those properties? Okay, so the last aspect of the zoning bylaw that we did amend was Schedule A, and those were the maps. So there were almost 4 maps that needed amendments. It's really only 3 maps. There's just information on map 7 and 8 that's the same that we had to change. So on map 7 and map 8, this mainly pertains to properties in the northwest, on the west side of Center Road. So here we saw the CC-7 go to CC, the CCH to just CC. We didn't know what that H was for. There was no criteria defined. So we thought that provided it's subject to the confirmation of servicing and site plan control, we could remove the H. We provided the CC H14 to just CC, it deleted the H14. There was a component of this property, the rear component to the west, that to my understanding had previously undergone a zoning bylaw amendment to include a range of uses. So in our opinion, because it's not actually included within the municipal service area, notwithstanding what those permissions were, they're actually not able to come forward to fruition. So it may be a case where the lands are inappropriately designated at this point in time. However, I think we've left it in the designation because we are about to renegotiate the servicing agreement, and whether or not there's an opportunity to adjust the boundary to include, talking about this rear portion up here.
Yeah.
Yes.
So whether or not there's an opportunity to readjust the boundary, we're of the opinion that at this time we could put it back in the general agriculture zone because really there are no commercial uses that would be supported there. So I can understand where it might be a little difficult to comprehend that somebody went through a process to allow an increased range of uses. However, in our opinion, one of the intents of this whole exercise was to have people have a greater understanding of what is actually permitted and what can be serviced on the property, giving them a real expectation of what can be done. So we think at this time, rezoning to just general agriculture is most appropriate. So any questions? I think Deputy Mayor's declared pecuniary interest on this one. Any other discussions internally? I do think that this is one probably best dealt with at the municipal servicing agreement renegotiation stage. We can then down designate it now, but that may be more issues than perhaps renegotiating the boundary. If there are no questions, I'll continue. So then the property immediately to the south of that property or southeast is the commercial corridor H11, just going down to a CC. So for the most part, those were just removing holding provisions or site-specific zones that were no longer required or deemed to be redundant. Map 8 is really just the West Cast property, I believe, or just West Cast property.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So it previously was CC-7. Everything that's on that property right now, this is where there's previously permission for a hatchery and processing. That's not what's there now, so we consider it to be a non-required, basically site-specific permission. So we've just downzoned it to commercial corridor.
It wasn't a hatchery.
No,
No.
see,
The hatcheries
So-
at Cuddy's.
they came to us
Yeah.
looking to have that designation just because they were thinking of utilizing
Yeah.
part of that building
Yeah.
instead of building a new hatchery
Yeah.
on the home farm.
Okay.
So we gave them permission, but when they started investigating it further, because there had been oil in the facility, they could no longer get the HACCP certification.
Right.
So that's why that was put in.
So we just determined it to no longer be applicable, clean it up, took it out. So
Yep.
it's likely that we'll leave the CC7, CC3, the other ones that we deleted in the zoning bylaw, we'll just reuse them in the future. So you might see some out of order. We'll make sure the consolidation, when we get a consolidation, is clear. But we are just trying to eliminate some of the redundancies we found. So map 23A. This one is particularly interesting, and there may be a few questions associated with it. So currently, this strip is predominantly speaking to Special Policy Area 1. So this area down here, which is pink,
Yeah.
which means it's in the commercial corridor. However, it was historically zoned, with the exception of the CC-1 parcel, for urban residential. So there's two large-scale, large parcels there, or I guess there's more than two. There's a few parcels in there, but they're zoned basically for predominantly residential development. Under the assumptions that we develop, large-scale residential is not permitted. The only residential that really would have been, I guess, permitted by Strathroy-Caradoc is potentially the addition of an infill lot. So we thought it was most appropriate to conform this, make the zoning conform with the underlying land use designation. So we've basically taken away the permissions for urban residential land use and recommended that they be placed in a commercial corridor zoning that matches their underlying land use. So we do realize that, you know, those are landowners and that's what the public process is for. They can come and advocate to us why they think that urban residential is appropriate. However, they are going to be significantly constrained. There's no way we would entertain a subdivision on those lands. It would really be one lot or one additional lot at best. And would be on private services, which would then cause other issues. And we think it's most appropriate to go CC residential or CC commercial corridor. So we did discuss this with Jeff earlier today, and he has concerns about this. So through the public consultation process, we want to make sure that it's very transparent that, you know, historically you may have been zoned for urban residential. However, in actuality, being able to construct urban residential or any residential beyond a single lot or a single dwelling was highly unlikely. So Strathroy-Caradoc has provided one stub to the property line. That stub is intended to service one development, and it's not a large-scale residential development. So really this is one area where there was a significant amount of inconsistency, and we're just trying to clean it up. Any questions about this?
Mr. Stockman?
These have been in existence for a long, long time. I don't know if they were before my time here. What happens to the Nordhoff house? Because that's,
I don't know where he is.
It's the,
it's
just
number,
a-
it's the first
Just
UR.
above HR.
Okay.
Yeah. It's the one just south of Larry
H9,
McDonald.
sorry.
And then the cleaning place, that's the next one down. There's a house on that. And sure, there's a fair bit of backyard or, you know, open space. And then there's the house that's right on the corner of Putzer's lot. That's H9. So we're not recognizing that there is residential there.
So if they're zoned under CC, then the existing use of the land would be allowed to continue until redevelopment, at which time, if it's ever redeveloped where there are existing uses, then they'd be required to conform to the permitted uses of the CC. So we're trying to balance, we're recognizing what's there, allowing them to continue so long as they don't redevelop or propose new development, but as soon as they do, then we're saying, you're in the CC zone, this is intended for commercial development, please conform to our policies and our regulations.
Okay, so additional question. If one of these houses burns down, can they rebuild?
Yes. So under the zoning bylaw, there are provisions about rebuilding after natural causes.
Councilor Hendricks?
I'm just anticipating what their concerns might be. Does this cause their property to be more valuable? Are they going to get a new impact notice and be bumped up?
I would hesitate to say they would get any change in their assessments.
Not until the use changes.
Not till the
but-
use changes, and then there would be a different assessment there.
Yeah, because if that was my house, I'd be screaming if that was gonna happen.
Yeah. So zoning shouldn't affect the actual
No,
use of, yeah.
the use is what the impact goes with what it's being used for, not what it's potentially used for.
Mhm.
So I think the one concern that those individuals will have is once it's switched to the CC zone, will they be able to put an addition on their house, or can they do any of those things?
So in my opinion, yes,
Okay.
but that will be at the discretion of the CBO. So it is an existing use is a permitted use, so I think that an expansion is reasonable. He will be required to conform to the setbacks of the CC zone, which may be a little tighter than the urban residential, but that's really for his protection in the long run. Should one of his neighbors put up a structure or a gas bar or some other use. So in my opinion, yes, any expansion or renovation would be permitted. It's just really, we're really trying to move away from the large scale residential potential for subdivision here, or somebody thinking they have the potential for a subdivision, coming in, doing the work, hiring the consultants and saying, here's my plan of subdivision. We're saying, no, that's not gonna fly here. So we want to make sure, when Jeff and I read these, we look at the UR, and Jeff doesn't really look at those at the OP very often. So he may not be aware that the underlying land use or long-term plan for this area is commercial corridor. So if we start issuing building permits that are out of sync, we're making it a little more challenging to do long-range planning here.
But for, say, the individual that purchased H9 within whatever the last number of years, based on the assumption that he could put residential there, he may be more than a little bit upset.
Maybe, and that's something that we will have to deal with as council and as administrative staff. There's always potential to appeal to the OMB, but you'd have to have significant land use rationale as to why the UR is more appropriate than the commercial corridor in this location. It's just, it would put us in a challenging spot if we ever had to do a variance or another zone change for like a site-specific UR, and that one of the tests is, does it conform to the OP? Well, really, it does not. So it's quite, our hands are quite tied in what we can support, and by changing the zoning, we're able to support what we consider as a more appropriate use of land in the long term.
And on top of that, it would not be able to connect to the sewer and water because of our agreement.
Yeah, it's not
No.
residential.
With the infilling, he would have be able to put in one house.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's not the best use of the land for
Right.
single family
Yeah.
lot.
I'm just wondering when that changed from commercial to UR.
And we can find out though.
Quite a while ago, I would think. Because like it was, I was always under the assumption that that was commercial. Because there was the gas
Because it was
station.
holding. You're talking about H9? or-
Yeah, yeah.
Because it's got the holding provision, that's
Holding
why.
is for a plan of subdivision.
Oh, okay, I thought it
Yeah.
was for just any other use that it was.
That's for
See, because like McDougal's used to have a little store there in the gas station, and there was the house beside there.
It's a subdivision agreement.
yeah.
It looks like it was H9 in 2007.
The same, yeah.
You are H9.
Before we jump into the, I'm assuming you're going to the 23B.
If there's no further questions,
Well,
I'm
I
just
just,
going to explain the A quickly. Just the
oh yeah, just go ahead.
the A to urban
Yeah.
residential. It's just, it's described as a settlement area now, so the general agricultural zoning of that parcel is, we really don't want an agricultural use there, so we thought it was most appropriate to go to an urban residential, and again, that would permit, I believe there's 2 dwellings down there, there would really be no change to their land use permissions other than they can't have agricultural uses, which.
I don't think there ever was there.
No, so it's probably just residual zoning left over from probably that
Because
township
like the Gordon house, that's been there for years, and the house on the corner is not that young either. So,
So there's.
Maybe they wanted backyard chickens.
I just had 2 questions. They're both, it's on 23A and B. So on the west side of Center Road, on the Cuddy properties, it's still zoned A. And I would think if we're gonna be changing the UR to the CC zone, wouldn't we be best to move the, like the large dash line back towards where it's designated in our OP to have it, you know, the straight across and rezone those lands from agricultural to the commercial corridor.
That is a very good question.
Yeah, it's not consistent with the other map.
No, it's not.
Because in
Map,
my
map
opinion,
7 shows that, well, it says C23D, but 23D and 20.
So the dashed line, I think, is just an indication of the extent of the mapping. But I can get,
yeah, I would just like to see that be brought into.
the top of Charlesville, and like the end of the line.
is it maybe A because of the hatchery and
This.
the
Well,
cutty?
because
all
of
the
the
way up.
Cuddy's,
And then have that into the CC.
But Curtis, is that maybe because of the hatchery on the home farm? That's agricultural.
But I would think if we're trying to align everything with our official plan, we need to be conforming it all together.
So they can permit to continue their agricultural use until,
Yeah.
okay. So really, that's a good catch. Oh, it's not catching on. And then
Now,
that's,
is that land owned by Cuddy Corp, or is that owned by Four Partners?
I don't think that matters.
No.
Oh, because further up, what's owned by Cuddy Corp is CC. What's owned by Cuddy, the Four Partners, is agricultural.
so that
They,
like
they,
north
they
side
did
over
that in, what was it, 2000? Well, no, some of it was done in 2001, some of it was done after that.
But I think at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who owns the property. It's the best to align with the official plan of the zone.
they obviously think it's CC because they got signs up offering people to set up businesses
There's
there.
like an office, retail, the big
Yeah.
sign in the
Yeah.
corner, so, yeah, that's not a bad recommendation.
But I guess I would question as far as the hatchery, is that CC or is that A?
I would say CC because it's in the commercial land use designation, so we don't want the hatchery there forever.
I would tend to agree.
That's
but-
council's, it's currently zoned agricultural, if we wanted to only zone certain parts CC, we might be dealing with this property again in the future, or we can go all CC now, but if they wish to
No,
under
I
the
think you
CC,
should
they're
all
allowed their
CC now.
existing,
We're doing it now, do it all.
Yeah.
I agree.
See, because when they changed
Well, why wouldn't you?
the designation from Cuddy's, from the home farm north to Mullaferry, changed it from A to CC, there was significant opposition from O'Maffra. Because I remember I was on when that happened. And it had been pasture for as long as I could remember, whether it was turkey pasture or horse or cattle pasture. But there was significant opposition by,
And it might be again.
yeah, well, there's
Possible.
there's, yeah.
Good. Yeah, it's an existing use, and so it should be fine. And realistically, down the line, when they do go to develop it, we just save them, how much is it for a zoning
Yeah,
bylaw?
but no, I think put it in right now. Absolutely.
They can protest it if they.
Well, that's fine, but
Yeah.
like Curtis says, in the future, if they want to develop, then all of a sudden they're sitting there, oh, we gotta change the zone and, no, put it in right now.
And they will be consulted on the change, so
Pardon?
if, they will be consulted on
Yeah.
the change, well, they will receive notice, so they do have the opportunity to provide us with comments if they are so opposed. That's something council will again have to reconsider in the winter.
Yep.
And then, with respect to these two, do you have any further comments, Margaret?
No.
Okay. So the map 23B, just to quickly go through, again, it was the removal of mainly holding provisions and site-specific to now match what's being outlined under the new provisions and under where we removed the holdings so that there was no redundancy. So the H13, which is the market study on the northern Cuddy lands, was kept because it was specific, but all the other holding provisions were moved.
So, Mr. Stockman?
CC4, you have 28508 2nd Street. That doesn't exist. It's that'd be Center Road. On that's the fourth last one on the
In the
page 8.
descriptions? Okay. Is it the address is off 2nd Street?
Pardon?
The address is off 2nd Street?
The address would be no. The address would be Center Road because that number
That
does
number
not
isn't,
exist.
not on Second Street.
No,
That's a center,
Yeah.
center
because it's the
road.
5-digit number that's on all north-south.
This one, it's got a 28508 Center Road is this address. Its actual frontage is along 2nd Street where the address should have been changed to 2nd Street.
Okay, so the number's wrong, not the street.
No, they've retained 28508 Center Road as they've requested that to change to keep that address because they want the exposure off center.
Right.
But their actual 911 address off there should be off 2nd Street because their frontage is the smallest fronting on the road, and that's actually the 2nd Street entrance, but they've asked to retain Center Road as their address.
Okay, so that's from Keelan property. Did they have behind Cameron then too?
That was all
That's all
done.
Oh.
That this is it's all been
It
done.
doesn't show up on here.
No, that's been more recent than these maps.
Okay.
Yeah, we did all that reconfiguring of it.
Yeah.
So are there any further questions on anything that was presented tonight? Anything that we missed? Anything else you would like to see? Anything that was discussed that you really didn't want to see? Is there any other feedback you'd like me to take back to the office in advance of the preparation of the notice? And how does council wish to proceed at this point in time? So I have an idea of what you're looking for in terms of amendments. We can either put them into, we provided this format because it was a lot easier than the replace and find and replace kind of format of a typical OPA. So we provided this track changes version basically so that you can see where the changes are occurring, but what will be circulated with the notice will be section 5.3 be removed and replaced with the following, section 5.7 be replaced with the following. So if council would like to see another copy like this before we produce the public notice, we can facilitate that. It just impacts our timeline. Or if you want to say, you know, we're comfortable with this, we'll address any further comments at the public consultation. We can do that. Basically, if we want to make, I believe it's the January 15th meeting of council, our public notice has to be in the mail by next Monday. which means we have a busy week. So it's a large circulation. It's 120 meters of the extent of these properties, so it's going to hit a lot of Strathroy down here. The west side won't be so bad, but it is a big notice, and there are a few amendments we have to pay some attention to. So it's right now it's council's prerogative how you would like to proceed, and just direct me to bring it back to the office and get rolling on things.
So we're gonna stop it.
Just one general comment, which you were asking for first.
Yeah.
I think it's really good that we've gone through this and checked it and cleaned up where it's appropriate. But I think we also need to have regard for why some of the things were done the way they were done previously. You know, we can't go and change something from one thing to something else without knowing why some of that was done in the first place. And, you know, there's not all people sitting around this table were not here, a fair number were not here when a lot of this stuff was done. So I think we need to be careful that we don't get ourselves into more trouble with some of these changes. Because there were valid reasons why some of these things were done, and I can't go further because of, you know, previously, but for conflict. But there were valid reasons why some of these things were done.
And I'm sure it'll come out at a public meeting. And then we'll have to deal with it. Well, that's why we have a public meeting.
So
But
that is one challenge, is that decisions were made in the past, perhaps in isolation of the key decisions, and that's what we're really trying to correct. So there will be a public component that's very vital to this process, and how we deal with that is probably going to be a big collective decision we're going to have to deal with early into February and March. So.
No, I believe that.
We do understand that there are a number of decisions made over a long period of time, and that perhaps not all of them included the full scope of analysis with respect to servicing. So we don't want to mislead people. What they think they can do with their property is not actually what they can do with their property. So it's kind of a balancing act at this point in time.
Well, I think it's good to go through and quote unquote clean this up. Because it's been going on.
And those reasons things might have changed since those reasons. So if there's still valid reasons, we'll hear about it.
Yep. No, I think it was that we added to this. Absolutely, because you know the way when Strathroy starts to complain, and I mean we should have things, try to have things in place as best possible, and you know obviously we're going to have some reaction from the public, and that's rightfully so. I mean that's part of the process.
And at the end of the day, it's not just Strathroy Caradoc, it's when people come to Christy or Kathy or Deb and are asking about development, then they have some idea of what we're looking for. Yeah.
No, it's good. Do we need a report before we send it out? I don't think we do we?
I feel comfortable in
Yeah,
just making the amendments as discussed.
Yeah.
Because there will be another opportunity for us to even tweak over top of the public.
Right. Yeah. No, I think it's okay.
So just again, Christy, you said that in the notice that goes out, it'll include what the amendment will be like this, or
It will be the OPA version.
Okay.
So it will be the replace with this, delete this. So it may not be as clear as this. I think the intent right now is to include the schedules where the zone changes are proposed, because that is what will impact people likely the
That's
most.
what they're gonna look at.
That's
Okay, what's my
where's my
change?
property?
Yeah.
How is this impacting me?
Impact.
So it's going to be probably a challenging notice to prepare, to include the scope of what's being proposed, but it will hopefully in public forum come out what the additional issues may be, and if people have additional questions about why we're doing it or what's being proposed. Like, that's another aspect that the public is probably largely unaware of, is why we've undertaken this process, why this moratorium was placed, and what we're doing to address it. So yeah, it will probably look more like a formal document, which may dissuade some people from participating in the process, but it's typically part of the planning act of what we do.
I I think as long as people have maps that are like this, then if it concerns them, they'll comment.
Now, can we provide or have the links online somewhere where it has these documents and
If I may, what I'm proposing is we would do like an open house afternoon and public meeting in the evening. We will have all of these documents like we did for our OPA in regards to the surplus farm dwelling severances. We posted them specifically on the website so people could read it right on our front page, so they could go to it directly, and we'll also have it available here. If anybody would like a copy, we'd be more than happy to supply them with the background information that Christian has prepared tonight. So.
Good.
Deputy Stockman?
Just one simple question on logistics. Be up here or downstairs?
I would propose to have it here because I think it's important to have it recorded so we know what people are saying. We may end up, I feel if you have the open house and the public meeting, the open house will have people come out and be able to speak to Christy directly, and that may answer their questions, and they may be satisfied with their answers, and then may or may not return to the public meeting later on.
And the public meeting will be on a separate night, just the public vote.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's
well,
the intent,
I'm looking
is to just have.
at, number of people that may or may not show up.
Mm-hmm.
Realizing that, yes, we don't have recording, but we could get
We
recording.
could, yes, and if we do find that there is a lot of interest and a lot of people wanting to come, then we would likely move it to downstairs and obtain some recording equipment of some sort, like we did for the surplus farm dwelling severance program.
And what we could do is, because I'm assuming that this is the amount of staff and council that will be here, we can move those 4 tables and then have
Yes.
chairs to the
Additional
max of
seating.
45.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So for your open house, do you have a tentative dates? I know we were aiming for anything January 15th for the next
Yes.
public meeting, so would we advance that? The public open house?
I would have it the same day,
Okay.
open house in the afternoon, public meeting in the evening. I think that's what we did with our surplus farm dwelling severances. I believe we started at, the open house will begin at 5 and public meeting started at 7.
I think so.
We can confirm the dates tomorrow.
Yeah. So we would be looking at, Monday is January 15th is a Monday, so if we would like to have it on that night, then we would need a resolution to set that.
So moved.
Okay. Seconder? Councilor Hendricks? Is Gerald going to be available?
He's good.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is for the open house and the meeting?
Yes.
Motion? Okay.
Just wait till he gets.
Yeah, I'm gonna wait till, I already thought about it. I was like, no, we're not gonna do this until.
He doesn't have his calendar with him anyway. We've been through that little thing before.
I find it really interesting. Everybody went to the paper.
It's
It
just
says on
easiest to
the-
follow along.
Yeah.
Mine was just here.
Yeah,
And it's easy to
And
put
then
probably
the
two
tables
screens.
were so
the tables were too
reduced
small.
that you could hardly read it, and when you enlarged it, you went off of the page.
I just had to put that in there.
Uh,
I don't know if you want that option.
And when you try and go back and forth, this thing has such a short time of staying on.
Yeah, mine does too. Can you reconfigure that? to
Yeah,
like
you
Yeah.
that?
can, but I just never get around to doing it, because it doesn't, it's not a problem at home.
Alrighty, so this was moved by Deputy Stockman and second by Councilor Hendricks, and it's resolved that council directs staff to revise the draft amendments to the official plan and zoning bylaw based on the input received, from council and proceed to schedule the public meeting for January 15th, 2018, beginning at 5 p.m. with the open house and 7 p.m. for public meeting. We're all available. Are you available for the 15th?
I hope so.
Okay.
If I may, I would just not put the specific times in there for right
Okay.
now, just in case we want to change them based on the amount of people that we're planning on coming to the open. We may find there's a lot of feedback, so the open house may have to run a little longer to be able to accommodate anyone else's wishes to come, so,
Okay, so public meeting / open house for January 15th.
yes,
Okay.
with times to be determined.
Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? Yeah, that's carried. Do we need any other direction from us?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
That covers
Yep.
it.
Excellent.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you for all your hard work. Okay. And we need to file, right?
No.
No, not doing that. Okay, so then just a motion to adjourn at 7:50 p.m. Councilor Kim and Councilor Sanders, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, thank you.